And welcome everyone to the 2025 Post-Match Financial Education webinar. I am one of your teachers, Tyler Olson. I'm so glad that you all have joined us today. And I'm thankful that you won't have to just hear my voice this entire time. Aside from myself, we have 5 other excellent teachers who are ready to share everything that they know that's going to be relevant to your transition from medical school to intern year. Um, Ronnie Colvin, he's a certified financial planner. He's going to be talking about the managing cash flow, budgeting between now and when you get your first paycheck this summer. After that, Sarah Young, also a certified financial planner. She's going to be discussing the pros and cons of renting versus buying and trying to help you to navigate that decision if you're trying to sort that out now. After that, Larry Keller, also a certified financial planner, if you're catching a theme here, and he's going to be talking about disability insurance. He's going to be talking about the pros and cons of when you should get disability insurance and why it's so important for physicians to get it. And then after that is going to be Dr. Jeff Steiner. He's a anesthesiologist, but now he's also a full-on practicing financial planner, and he's going to be talking about student loans. So that'll be exciting. And then later on, we've got some more discussion around investing. Dr. Coben Solberg will be talking about that. And in between, I'll intersperse with talking about taxes, as well as how to make a financial plan while you're in residency. So that's what we've got going on here. We're going to be here for the next 4 hours and appreciate you all. So also, you'll have an opportunity here to ask questions. So there's a Q&A, and if you type in a question, then me or one of the other people, one of the other teachers who are here with us still, they'll, any of us can answer these questions for you. And we'll also very likely have time after each segment to address specific questions that you have. So we don't want to just talk the whole time. We really want to make this as helpful to you specifically as possible. So that's what we have. Thanks again for joining. And to get started, we're going to ask Ronnie Colvin um, to speak. He's a certified financial planner. He actually works with me at Olson FP, and he's going to be talking about residency, surviving until your next paycheck. Ronnie, please take it away.
Thank you, Tyler. I would say good morning, everybody. I think we just hit noon where I'm at, so it's afternoon now. Um, yeah, the you get your last student loan disbursement in January, and you got to live off that, plus whatever side income you may or may not have, all the way through to your first paycheck in residency, which might not be to July, depending on how your target program where you're going to be, if they're paying once a month or every other week, that kind of thing. So it can be a significant amount of time before you see any inflow again. Um, that's a problem to deal with. It's just part of life, unfortunately. Um, but to solidify my reputation as the potty mouth planner, I have to use a dirty word, and that is budget. Budget, budget, budget. You've got to know where the money's going and where it's coming from. The primary requirement is you got to cover your basic needs: shelter, food, and utilities. You got to exist until you get that first paycheck when you get there to your program. Some of the things obviously you're keeping track of at that time is where you're at when you're finishing school till you graduate, and whether you move right away or whether you stay there and move at the last minute. Either way, you still got a place to live and you got to pay for that. Your food and any kind of entertainment, your utilities and stuff like that, you got to cover. Then you've got to think about relocation expenses. How far are you going? You've got to move your stuff, you got to move yourself, and you got to secure your initial housing in your target location, wherever it is you're going. Now, there are tips and budgetary ideas and things like that all over the place for this part of it when you get there. The question is surviving until then. So part of the idea is to get whatever additional temporary income you can get your hands on. That can be done through, gig opportunities from driving for DoorDash, Lyft, and Uber. If there are part-time jobs available to you that, working for a temp agency, and whether that's in the medical field or not, doesn't really matter. It may be possible for you to make a little more per hour if it is in a medical field or adjacent to, if you have that capability, and whether you do it again locally or whether you just go on and move after graduation and go to your target location after you've matched and everything, and start doing some work there. Either way, you want to try and use some sort of temporary income to stretch the last of that student loan disbursement as far as it will go. To do that, again, it's that dirty word, it's that budget, is knowing what you've got to pay to live in your housing and shelter and utilities and any other debts you have to service in the meantime, whether that's credit card debts, whether that's, well, you shouldn't be any student loan payments until later, so you shouldn't have to worry about that because those should be in deferment until you start getting paid. But anything like that, don't let go of any money you don't have to. So whatever's in your account, keep it and stretch it as far as it will go. Any credit card payments, car payments, anything like that you might have, make the bare minimum payments on those until you get that first paycheck. And you can start living differently once you start getting paid there. If your family can provide support, great, but not everybody has that option. So if that's not something that's possible for you, you got to do what you got to do. There's all sorts of advice you'll see out there about, well, don't use credit cards or, don't borrow any more money. Again, you got to keep a roof over your head. You got to do what you have to do. In order of preference, what you would want to do is income from some kind of job. You're still, of course, tapping what's left of your student loan disbursement, but income from some kind of employment if you can do it. After that, personal loans will have lower interest rates than credit cards, obviously. Credit cards is the place of last resort because of those interest rates. It is possible to stretch them because you can make the minimum payments even if you have to use it for a couple of months until you get those residency paychecks. But you don't want to accrue any more debt if you don't have to, or if you do have to, keep it as a low interest rate as possible. But again, you got to do what you got to do. Some tips for making that happen. First thing you want to do is, once you find out where you're matching and where you're going, is contact existing residents that are in that program for housing information. Any tips they can give you on where to live, particularly proximity to the location, to the hospital or wherever it is you're going to be working. Because the last thing you want after a long day as a resident is an hour commute home. And in the morning, do it again for an hour backwards and adding 2 hours to your day every day. So if you're not familiar with the area where you're going to, contacting those existing residents will help you. And in a lot of cases, some of those existing residents will have places they can rent out or sublet. They'll know better places for location. In some cases, it'll be safety. Depending on where you're going, if it's an inner city location, some places will be safer than others. And maybe you don't want to live in a particular neighborhood that looks good from, apartments.com or something else like that. Looks like it would be ideal from what you're paying for rent, but maybe not. So talk to existing residents at that target location and get some of those tips for how to live better, because they'll know from experience, and they've been burned on some things, so they'll already know what's going on at that location. So again, knowing what's coming in, if anything, but from that last student loan disbursement, and what has to go out, absolutely has to go out. Your rent, wherever it is you're at, those moving expenses, remember you're gonna have those. There are ways you can optimize the moving experience, the relocation experience. If you don't have a lot of stuff, consider not taking it with you, particularly if it's just cheap furniture, because you can get cheap furniture where we're at, where you're going. Anything to keep you from having to pay to move it. Moving with a moving company or something else like that is very expensive. One of the things that I personally did when I moved across the country is use the pods. You've seen those, that's cheaper. Having a pod with your stuff shipped is cheaper than having a moving company come get your stuff and move it across the country for you. It was a difference for me personally of $15,000 to move versus 2,500 bucks to move my stuff. Now I did pay movers at each end to load the pod, and then when it got to my destination to unload the pod. But that was still significantly cheaper than paying a moving company to do the whole thing start to finish. Um, those are kind of the ideas behind it, but just know that unless you do get a part-time job, you've got to stretch that last student loan disbursement as far as it will go. As other people have said, and probably will say, going into the future, you got to squeeze that last coin till it screams, because there's no more coming until that first residency paycheck shows up. So it's fairly short for me today. Obviously, I'm open for questions here, but that's kind of the idea. Just run that budget. There are ways to do it. If you're a software-based kind of person, you like apps on your phone, Monarch Money is one that we particularly use at Olson FP, but YNAB, or You Need a Budget, is another. Mint.com used to be something, but it doesn't exist anymore, so that's not really an option. If you're spreadsheet oriented, Tiller Money, Tiller, is very spreadsheet based. If you like that kind of interface, if that appeals to you, all of which are good for that kind of thing. But Monarch does have a mobile app, so you can use that if you're attuned to that kind of thing. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. And Tyler, if you've got some from the chat that you want to throw at me, that's fine.
We did get a question. Are any of those budgeting apps free? And I believe that they are. I don't know of any that are free now. I mean, YNAB is probably the least expensive because I think it's like $84 for a year or something like that. If I
Yeah, and
recall.
it's barely less expensive than Monarch, which is $99 a year.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of these, yeah, they are not free. Um, I personally find the exercise of just using like a Google Sheet at first, regardless of like using software or not, because you like when you if you do use software, it's very convenient, but it also removes a degree of um, I don't know, it removes a degree of like the tangibleness of like what is being spent. Like I really like writing out or typing out each
Mhm.
expense because then it kind of hits every time. It's like, oh, I got this one and I got that one. So yeah, I mean, but
Yeah, I
so
mean, a
Google,
Google Sheet will certainly do you. That's in terms of, I mean, all you got to do is a column for income and a column for expenses. You just know what's coming in, what's going out. It's a little more tedious, but if you got time on your hands, that's okay.
yeah. So Brianna, it's a great question. It I don't think that they're free, but like just take like one column in a Google Sheet that identifies the expenses, like and like what you've got for rent or mortgage or whatever, that you know is steady every single month. And then I like to have like a separate column for variable expenses, just because there can be some well variability to it, and that's where you might have some ability to tweak some things. Um, and then let's see. But yeah, a Google Sheet is a good place to start, and that one is free if you have a Gmail account.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Logan Davis asked, "Is there a reason you prefer Monarch over YNAB or Excel?" What do you think?
For us, particularly from with Monarch, of course, it has both a website and a mobile app, so you can do both. If you're at home and you're working, you've got a slightly different view and certainly more screen real estate to work in the web version of it. And when you're on the go, you have the mobile app, and they work together, so that works real well. Um, for us, particularly, and for our clients, Monarch is handy because it allows an advisor view. So rather than if you have an interaction with a financial advisor, somebody who's helping you work through these numbers, you either have to get on a Zoom like this and screen share, which can sometimes be a problem. But with Monarch, we get a native view at it. All you do is enable it to share with the person who's helping you, and then we can go in and see it, and we can actually even do stuff for you if you can't figure out how to do something. We can do that for you through that interface. So it's the Monarch is for us advisor focused and allows us to do more than if you were using YNAB, you just have to screen share with us and have to look at it together that way. And we can go, well, but what about here? And oh, wait, scroll back, go back, go back, go back. That experience of doing it over a Zoom call can be a little more tedious. But other than that,
Mhm.
most all of them are, do mostly the same things. It's just
I
that
would
their
I
user
would
interfaces
say
are different.
I've had good experience with YNAB. I've found it
Yeah,
like so YNAB I think is perfectly fine.
yeah,
I think I find from a tech perspective, maybe it's a little more like it feels like the mid 2000s to me. But that's just aesthetic, so it doesn't
yeah,
really
yeah.
matter. And then Excel, to your last point, Logan, that one, I mean, Excel is phenomenal. If you can run Excel, you can do amazing things.
Absolutely.
That is a very that's a lot more of detail oriented, and you have to know how to use Excel
Yes.
with its instructions and commands and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's certainly fine. I wanted to remind everyone too, because I don't think that I clarified this. You can post questions in the webinar chat. We will catch them, but it might be easier for everyone to be able to see. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see that there's a button that says Q&A, and you can click on that and you can type your question in there. It does allow for a little bit more organization of questions that have been asked and answered. So please use that if you can see it there on your screen. On the web or on the desktop app, which is what I'm using, it's just on it's on the bottom panel. And I think it's probably the same for the web-based. Nevertheless, if you can't find that, keep putting them in the webinar chat. That's fine. Julia asked, should resident physicians be consulting CFPs who are specialized, or can any CFP help with our situations? So, within the confines of cash flow planning, a certified financial planner is trained in cash flow planning and assistance. So, they're certainly equipped to do so, if that is your question. If you have a clarifying question, about what you mean specializing in. If you mean specializing in cash flow, absolutely, like CFPs can help. If you're talking about specializing with working with physicians, it kind of depends because there's like some unique things about your situation that not all certified financial planners know about. The ones who are here today do, but not any CFP will be like, yeah, I know about residency and fellowship and student loan management and contracts. If that's what you mean by specializing, then it would be a maybe. So if you have an additional question that clarifies that, please ask Julia. Um, let's see. Yeah, no, we got a bunch of questions. I'm really glad you're asking questions. This was in like Ronnie when you said, like, well, that pretty much wraps it up for me. Like, I'm like, that's we really want to have time for all of you to ask
Yeah,
your questions.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so here's another one. So sorry for the question to repeat, but I wasn't able. What is the more cost-effective option? Oh, okay. So Ronnie, here's one for you. What is the more cost-effective option compared to using a moving company to move and having people to load and unload? Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Excuse me. That's what I was talking about when I was doing part of my initial talk there is when I was moving across the country, I had to look at it. And my first instinct was I'm just going to call a moving company and have them handle it. And the quotes they gave me for that were just, if I had hair, it would have fallen out at that point. But because it was like 15 grand to move us across the country. And I dug into it, and you can pay a company at each end. For example, we use 2 Men in a Truck, and they're nationwide. And I'm not singling them out. I mean, you've got other companies that do this, but you pay them by the hour. Now, if you provide your own boxes and packing stuff, even better. But if not, you can buy them from them, and they'll just charge you for what they use. They'll come with a supply of boxes and packing stuff and everything, and they'll unload your place and box it all up and load it into the pod that's parked in the driveway or in the parking lot, wherever you put it. But you only pay them by the hour. So if you don't have a whole lot of stuff, it might cost you 75 bucks an hour. And they'll send two guys, sometimes four. If you tell them you've got a lot of stuff, they'll send four guys to do that. And you might pay, 300 bucks and it's done if you've supplied the boxes. Be a bit more, obviously, if you're buying the packing materials from them. And then the pod that moves from place to place, it takes your stuff from there, depends on how far it's going. So in my case, it was going across the country from Alabama to Nevada, and that was 2,500 bucks. Now it took a week to get it there, but that's no faster than a moving van would have anyway. The big problem with the moving companies is that they will load up, with their big truck, could be an 18-wheeler, whatever. It might just be your stuff. It might be yours and a couple of other people's stuff if they're filling the truck. And they send that truck and the crew across the country to your destination. You're paying for them to stay in hotels, you're paying for their meals, all that on that trip. And that adds up fast and it gets high. It's a lot cheaper to say, pay a couple guys to load the pod, unload the pod on the other end because you went with a local company that's there at your destination. And again, you pay them by the hour.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Ronnie. Great question. And um, and now we are starting to get questions in the Q&A box itself, which is great. Um, and actually this is something we talked about, Ronnie. Are there any healthcare adjacent jobs you've heard of, people getting in between the interim, between school and residency start date? Um, Jeff, are you there? I've heard of a couple ideas, but I don't think that I'm the best person to answer that question, nor Ronnie, because we're not in medicine. But if you are, maybe he's not here right
Uh,
now.
I know there are temp agencies that specialize in those kinds of services, whether it's just doing blood draws or home health aides and stuff like that. I mean, you can make 20, 25 bucks an hour doing that kind of stuff, and it's a temp basis, so you come and go as you want. But
Yeah.
Steiny may have some more detailed information for that kind of thing.
Uh, so the question, sorry, I was trying to do some of the chat questions. The question was, is there like medicine related that medical students could do?
Yeah.
Potentially. It's interesting though. It seems like on a lot of the forums and webinars I've been on with newly minted residents, they all kind of tend to gravitated toward like Meal Dash, Uber, those kind of things. Um, and I those that tended to like do medically related jobs were typically the ones that already had done that in the past, whether they're paramedics or did phlebotomy at some point during their training, or I don't know many that would go back and do the dictation, like in the ER, but
Scribing, yeah.
yeah, scribing. So that might be another option as well. But
Well,
there
and
is no, I haven't heard of any secret. I think there's going to be Olson, medical student employment services in the future, probably to try and help with
Well,
this. But
and
right
the
now,
adjacent stuff could
I'm not
easily be
aware of
tutoring,
any.
right?
tutoring.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, you can tutor people on the MCAT. You took it yourself. You can charge what 75 bucks an hour or more for or tutoring for test towards the MCAT for that kind of thing. Or if you've got students who are behind you who need help in organic chemistry, who doesn't need help in organic chemistry, and if you're good at that, you can pick up money doing that.
I think there is, well, Steiny, correct me if I'm wrong, but there can be some polarizing opinions about that, right? Because that like
Probably.
it goes into like mentoring, and like I'm not I'm I don't think that I know enough and have not been in the shoes to have a strong opinion, but I know some people do that, but other people are like, well, we should be like supporting one another and not like charging our younger med student colleagues. Is that accurate, or should people? Is that like a thing that is
I
common?
don't I don't know. It's tough because when you think about there are some people out there that do mentoring for getting into residency and that kind of thing. Um, and the way I view it, that's kind of tough to like get that ramped up between now and July 1st,
Mm.
to really have something ongoing like that.
Mm.
I mean, some of the books I've seen, it's like, well, I got into I don't know. I, I just don't know how viable that is. It's kind of like, earn money blogging. Well, it
Yeah,
takes some ramp up and time to do that. And so I don't know, it seems as though um, the simplest startup that you can do with the least amount of money is probably the way to go. If you're looking to try and earn some money. I know there are some relocation loans that are available. I don't
Mhm.
have any affiliations with any of those companies. I don't know what y'all's thoughts are, but kind of when Tyler had asked this question back on Twitter, I think last year, most people had a deficit of about 10 grand. Is that what you remember, Tyler?
10 grand for the transition.
Yeah.
So that included Eris fees from like September and like, a modest budget for like interview costs, which I presume I was under the that was under the presumption of virtual um interviews. And of course it would go up, like 15,000, I think, 12 to 15,000 if we're talking about like in person. So yeah, no, it's quite expensive, but like I'd say between I mean, a lot of the graduating students that I've spoken with the past few weeks, laying out like their budgets for the coming weeks and months, like it really depends on like, are they doing everything alone? If they're doing everything
Mm.
alone, then it's like moving expenses, just eating and fuel and stuff, and just normal life things and moving expenses, but then also like if they need to furnish their apartment as well as like having a place to or having a like a deposit on an apartment if you're going to rent and so forth. So it varies pretty widely, but I think anywhere between like I've not seen it being less than $4,000 in needs. Like that's bare minimum because life is expensive. Things have gotten expensive to just have and all those other expenses. Um, we do need to move on soon to Sarah. Thank you very much, Jeff, for chiming in. And we had two questions that are still related to budgeting, and I'm going to address those, and then Sarah, we'll start with you, okay? So this one asks for folks in relationships without combined finances, do you recommend making a budget individually or together? What do you think?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's. I mean, if you're planning on staying together, then you can certainly do it together. But I mean, if you're going separate directions, then there's no point in doing it together. If one of you is staying where you're at that location, and you're moving across, 2 states over, your expenses are going to be different anyway. I mean, unless that individual already is in an established career. I mean, I quote one of a piece of advice I came across for this was marry an attending. That'll solve all your problems. But if you're going your separate directions, even if you're trying to maintain a long distance relationship, your finances are going to be separate because you're going to have different expenses. So unless one of you is going to subsidize the other somehow, you're probably better off planning it separately.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. What really like having good communication between each other will help you to determine exactly where, like, what your nuances are and what you should do in terms of like what like organization you need to intertwine. Because there might be some connected things, like traveling to visit each other if you're like for those of you that matched in separate locations and you're trying to figure out those things, but then you're going to meet up and
Yeah,
so there might be some things, but you need to talk about it. And like in this, I would say especially so if you're I've met an inordinate number of couples where one person has no student loans and the other person has like $500,000 in student debt. And it's like that dynamic, it can be tricky, but it really gets quashed. The issues get quashed if you just talk about it and you kind of figure out like what sort of decisions you need to make jointly, what sort of decisions you are best off making separately, and respect one another's opinion on money and how to handle it, because everybody comes from a different place, like their
Yeah.
background on money and stuff. So, all right, Ronnie.
What was the other one?
Uh,
Was there a second one?
no, that was it. That was it.
Okay, you said there were two, but okay.
Oh,
All
you know
right.
what? There were two, but that second one, that's actually more related to student loans. So we'll cover that at
Perfect.
5 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. I really
Yep.
appreciate your part and helping with answering all these questions.
Yes, sir.
All right, and next up is Sarah Young. She's a certified financial planner, and she is living in a household with a resident. Her husband is a resident, and so not only is Sarah a professional in terms of financial planning, but she is living a lot of the decisions that many of you are about to make. And so Sarah is going to be talking about um, let's see, she's going to be talking about the decision of renting versus buying. So for those of you that are trying to decide what is the right choice to make, Sarah's going to talk about that. Sarah, if you could, let's see, yeah, you got to turn on your video, and then we'll take it away, and yeah, and oh yeah, and
Thanks,
unmute.
Tyler.
Yeah, go
Can you hear
go for
me?
it. Yep, we can hear you. Go for it.
Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks so much for making time today for this webinar. As Tyler said, I am a CFP and married to a resident and intern. So we were in your shoes at this time last year. And first and foremost, want to say a huge congratulations. I know that this is a there's a lot of emotions, a lot of decisions, and life is happening really, really fast. And one of these decisions is, should you buy or should you rent? And there's a lot of opinions on both sides. So we're going to go through, what does this look like? What are some of those pros and cons in real life? And how do you make the best decision for you and potentially partner, family, if that's something that's on the table for you as well. So I am going to try to share my screen here. I have some slides pulled up. Make sure that this is the right one. Can I share my screen? Here we go. All right. Thank you all for your patience. So buying versus renting. And this is a congratulatory slide for all of you. This is me, my husband, who is, like I said, a resident, and our 3 kiddos. So we are juggling a lot. But it's all good, and you will be having a great time next year as well. So first, it's helpful to start with, why are we talking about this? Some people make it seem like such a clear-cut decision one way or the other. There's a lot of conventional wisdom being thrown around. Oh, if you rent, then you're throwing away your money, or you can save on your taxes if you have a mortgage for your house. You should buy if your mortgage is going to be the same as your rent. So we're going to touch on all of these things, but this is sort of, everything seems really confusing, and a lot of times it seems like the no-brainer decision to go ahead and buy. So most of these do have a thread of truth, so we want to make sure that we are acknowledging that, but we're going to, like I said, dive more into the nuances and actually the facts and what this looks like in real life while you are a resident. So first, we're going to talk about buying. There are some very real advantages to buying, not least of which is the pride of home ownership and getting to be the boss of your space. So you get to decorate however you want. You can have however many pets you want. Putting up wallpaper, painting, knocking down walls if you want to. That's all a lot of fun. Your monthly payments will also be fixed for the life of your mortgage. That is a big benefit. You can plan for on that budget part a lot longer into the future. You're also not at risk of a landlord selling your property and being forced to move out. And there's a lot of talk about keeping the house as a rental when training is finished. So keeping that house when you move on to the next phase of your training, or when you're done with training, and having that as a source of passive income. So these are all very, very real advantages, but there are disadvantages as well. There's a lot of responsibility with owning a home. You are responsible for all of the repairs. If you have never fixed a sink, or changed out a window screen, things like that, those are all going to be on you. So some of these maintenance and repairs are going to be less of a factor if you purchase a condo versus if you're in an entire standalone house. And also a townhouse with maybe a small yard versus a larger house with grass that comes with lawn care, cleaning out the gutters. There is a lot of work to be done, and this takes out time when you are very busy with residency schedules that can be unpredictable. And also, they're expensive. So, when you're looking at your budget for how much home can I afford or how much rent can I afford, it's important to consider not just the mortgage payment that the bank is showing you based on the real estate taxes, insurance, and the mortgage itself, but also to add in 1 to 4% of the value of the home on an annual basis for maintenance and repairs. This does not include like paying somebody to cut the grass for you because you're really busy. This is truly replacing windows, replacing the roof, if your washing machine breaks. So that's an additional cost that is not immediately factored in, but can add up quickly. It's also can be very stressful to try to move quickly if you match into a fellowship or you're done with your training, you're moving to a new city across the country, and you are in a time you are forced to or you need to sell or want to sell at a time where maybe the housing market is down or you have a lot going on in your life, and selling a house is a lot of work. It's also expensive. So there are generally realtor fees to pay and costs associated with getting your home ready to sell, maybe some landscaping work, some fresh coat of paint, minor repairs, things like that, which all take time and additional expense. So, which also goes into the risk of being underwater on the cost of your home. So, this is something that's not talked about as much, but is a very real risk. And what that means is, and this is more risky if you take out a physician loan, for example, or a very small down payment. What that means is when you go to sell your house, the amount that you're going to receive after the realtor fees and the expenses and all of that is going to be less than going to owe more than you're going to receive from that transaction. So this is a list of some sample expenses from a $300,000 home sale. Half of the $300,000 is going to the mortgage, but you can see all of these other costs add up pretty quickly. Realtor commissions is generally about 6%. This one's only reflecting 3%. But as I mentioned, those transfer taxes, some of those things to get the home ready for sale, can make it really tricky to recoup, particularly if you're not going to be in the home for a very long time to allow it to appreciate. So renting is some of the pros of renting. If there's water leaking from your roof, you call your landlord and they take care of it. That is their job. That is why you are paying them. So if you don't like where you're living, then you can move at the end of your lease. You're not burdened with the hassle of selling the entire property. You also know what you're going to spend on pretty much everything for the length of your lease. So with a home, your real estate taxes can go up and your homeowner's insurance can go up. Your mortgage cost itself is fixed, but with a rental, all of those costs are factored in. And the expense and the time of dealing with all of the things related to your living space is going to be handled by somebody else, which allows for more budgeting stability and just time freedom. And depending on your specialty and your affinity for doing repairs, that could be more or less important to you. Some of the downsides of renting are that you don't have as much flexibility to make it your own in terms of paint and wallpaper and having as many pets as you want. And like I said, knocking down walls, things of that nature. There's also a risk of the landlord selling the property and you would be forced to move, although that doesn't happen very often. It is a possibility. And your rental expenses can go up. I mean, at the end of your lease, they can increase your rent, and then you are forced to move or have to pay the higher expenses. So with all of that, how do you decide what is right for you and your situation? I think buying a home is going to be a better fit if you are going to be in the same place for training for about 5 years or longer. If you're already familiar with the city and location where you're going to do your training, not just from a sense of you've gone and you've visited, but you are truly familiar with the neighborhoods. We were talking about earlier, reaching out to some of the current residents and asking about proximity to the hospital. What are some of the safe neighborhoods and the desirable neighborhoods? And you can get a lot of opinions, but it's always going to be different when you're living there yourself. So if you're really familiar with all of those locations and you know where you would enjoy living for many years and committing financially to that, then that is a definite pro factor to purchasing a home. If you're handy with home repairs, or you don't mind learning, watching YouTube videos and being okay with maybe messing something up, and also if you just enjoy it. So there's some people just like tinkering and fixing things. If that's you, or if you have some extra and access to a pool of cash to pay somebody for those types of repairs, then that's going to be helpful. Or if you have friends and family in your training location that would be able to help you if something happens, if your water heater goes out, or your heater's not working in the middle of the winter. Because those would all be on you. And if you're at the hospital for 24 hours and you can't get away, it is a very stressful situation to be in, versus being able to call a landlord. And also being comfortable with the risk that you might lose actual cash dollars on the sale of the home when you're ready to leave. It's not talked about as much, but it is a possibility. You could also earn a healthy chunk of cash, which is what's talked about more frequently. But you have to be comfortable knowing kind of what those risks are and be ready, willing, and comfortable to take those risks on. So here are some numbers. Definitely don't need to memorize this, but when we talk about, the equity in the home and the value of buying and what all this means and what does it mean to be underwater, these are mortgages of 300, 350, and 400,000. So if you're taking out a physician loan with 0% down, this would be the purchase price of your home, and then they would be the same amount of your mortgage, at a 6.5% interest rate. It's approximately where mortgage rates are right now. Physician loans tend to be on the little bit of a higher side because the bank is taking on more risk. There are other fees generally on top of this, like if the bank charges PMI. Many physician loans don't, but you can see what your monthly costs would be here. This is the principal and that should say interest. My apologies. Principal and interest. The insurance and the homeowner's insurance and the property taxes are going to be in addition to this. So when you're looking at your budget, you need to add some extra cost plus the extra cost of the maintenance expenses like we talked about. And at the end of 3 years, approximately, thinking that you would be in there slightly longer, 30 and 62 payments. This is how much equity that you would have built up in the value of these homes. If you go to sell a $300,000 house and you are hit with 6% realtor fees, that's going to be $18,000 plus those other expenses. So you can see that you will really need to be counting on the house appreciating in value quite a bit, or putting down a larger down payment up front just to break even. So when we talk about the risk of being underwater and what that looks like, these are some of the numbers to help to make that more concrete as you are weighing the decision. And here's a visual, if you prefer visuals over pure numbers. The value of the home, like I said, some people have made quite a bit of money even on their residency houses. So you have to think of, are you going to be hoping that you make a good amount of money on your residency house, but also the more expensive of a house that you purchase, and depending on the city you're going to, could also go down in value. So keeping this in mind, really, really important as you weigh the decision to take on that large home purchase. Renting makes sense if you're going to be at a shorter residency, 3, maybe 4 years. There are, like I said, a lot of costs associated with selling. And if you enjoy flexibility with your time when you are not going to be at the hospital. So you're not worrying about changing the air filters or calling for repair services, or you're going to be in a very demanding schedule. Maybe you're expecting to be working 80 hours a week and you don't think that you're going to have time to deal with all of the things that go along with home ownership. And if you just don't like the risk of the value of the house going down, like in the previous graph that we looked at, if you would rather just know what your expenses are, understand that the cost of renting might go up over the next couple of years. You know, you're not going to make $50,000 on a rental, but it's not guaranteed on purchasing a house either. So if you would rather have more peace of mind and not dealing with unexpected maintenance and repair expenses, and would rather do whatever you want with your free time, then renting does make a lot of sense. So bringing this back to the conventional wisdom that we looked at the beginning, this is a this was a slide that actually my husband and I saw last year when we went to a talk, this very similar talk, but was put on by an institution that was wanting to sell us mortgages. And you can see that the renting disadvantages look really, really big and the buying advantages look really, really big. And so it looks like it's awesome to buy, and like renting is such a huge pain in the butt when you just look at it visually. But like I said, we're gonna look at some of these. So renting is throwaway money. And are you building equity? No, you're not. But you're also paying for the convenience factor of not having to deal with last minute repairs and waiting for the service people and the variability of what those expenses might be. You'll save on taxes if you have a mortgage. This is possible, although the way that our taxes work now, less likely than it was in the past. And also, as a resident, you're in a fairly favorable tax bracket right now. So the amount that you would be saving in taxes is not going to be huge and very unlikely to offset those additional kind of maintenance expenses, all else being equal, of purchasing a home. Buy a house and have a mortgage if it's going to be the same amount as rent. Your mortgage should actually be a fair bit cheaper than rent because you need to be accounting for those maintenance expenses, that 1 to 4%, some of those other unknown costs that come into it, as well as the time of doing all the maintenance on the home. Like I said, that's part of the convenience cost of renting. And so you need to make sure that you're compensating yourself if you're going to be taking out a mortgage instead of renting. And owning a home builds equity. Yes, it does. As we looked on the previous slides, those the bottom the bottom two rows were how much equity you build over 3 or 5 years, depending on common lengths of residencies. And it could be as low as $11,000 up to around $23,000, depending on the size of your mortgage. And that is a very real amount of cash, especially as you're sitting here, maybe you haven't had a job before. $20,000 have $20,000 as a chunk of change. But when you put it apples to apples, how much you're spending on the rent versus how much you spend on the house and the furniture that you might buy, and you're more likely to buy new, nicer furniture when you're buying your house versus if you're in a rental. So some of those accessory expenses are also a bit higher when you buy. And the amount of equity to overcome those selling expenses needs to be fairly considerable before you would actually be getting some of that economic value back. So that is all I have, and we will take questions.
That was awesome, Sarah. Thank you. And we do have a number of questions to address. The first one for you is there a specific reason being underwater is higher risk with a physician loan?
Oh, good question. Many banks will traditionally, they have wanted you to put down 20% of the value of the home. That's your down payment. And so the bank would only be lending you 80%. And so when you go to sell, even if the value of the house has gone down from when you purchased it, you're not recouping all of the money that you put into it, but you don't need to bring additional money to the table. With a physician loan, if you're putting 0% down and the value of the home goes down, now your mortgage is higher than the value of the house. And so in order to sell, you have to bring outside money. It's basically your down payment after the fact just to get out of the ownership of the home. Let me know if I need to explain that further.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. If you have if you have further questions on it, just ask a further question. Someone also asked how to how do you get a physician's loan? And this is a question I run into. I mean, now we're just coming down to people that we know, right? Do you
Yes.
know someone that like works nationally?
Um, I don't know somebody that works nationally specifically. I've reached out to a number of different banks. The thing with physician loans is that generally the banks are going to keep those loans on their books, and that is helpful. It's helpful to know what the alternative is that many banks, if you are putting 20% down and you're buying a house, then the bank is going to issue you the loan, and then they're going to turn it around and they're going to sell it to a government entity. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you may have heard those terms before. Because there are a lot of rules and regulations around making sure that those loans are safe, including that down payment. The banks, for physician loans, they would like you to become a customer and a client of the bank. So they are taking a risk on writing a loan that is a riskier loan with 0% down payment, because if you default on the loan, then they could be on the hook for that difference. And so they're willing to do that, but then they keep it on their books. So you're more likely to find a physician loan with a local credit union, a smaller local or regional bank, versus many of the larger banks that are in the volume business, like Rocket Mortgage. I don't know if they do physician loans, but most of them it's a volume business, and so they're trying to offload them as soon as they can.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah. No, that's that dynamic. Very true. I know somebody that is able to work with physicians on physician loans. They work for Alliant Credit Union, and they can work with anyone except in the state of Maryland because Maryland requires like an actual office in their state boundaries to like be able to sell mortgages there. Every other state apparently does not require that. I I have no conflict of interest or any sort of business or financial relationship with him. I just know he does good work. His name is Michael Zweisen, and I just put the link in the chat to his page. So if any of you are looking for a a lending option with a physician's loan, you can get in touch with Michael. And unless for except for those of you that are that are going to Johns Hopkins or something like that, in Maryland, he can help you. And I know he does really good work. We had some other questions here. Oh, someone mentioned Fifth Third Bank has a good physician loan product. Yeah, I've heard of that too. Um, Regarding the physician loan, would you advise including our spouse's income, a non-physician, on the application? Secondly, any caveats I should be aware of adding my partner to the mortgage with my husband?
Adding your partner to the mortgage, you said husband. So adding your husband to the mortgage, that is a largely a personal decision. You're going to be able to qualify for a larger loan. Um, I'm not actually, I would think that you would still be able to qualify for a physician loan based on both of you. But there might be some nuances to that, and that might be bank specific. Should you include your spouse or partner in the overall income when trying to qualify and thinking about what can we afford? You certainly can. I would encourage you not to stretch that too far, so that you are not house poor. So generally, the rule of thumb is about 35% of your pay towards debts, which is going to include your student loans. And your mortgage payment. 28% ish towards housing. If you're in a high cost of living area, that's tricky. Um, and so you can, bump that up a little bit higher. But the thing is to think about what you value. If in your free time, are you really a homebody? You gonna want to stay at home and enjoy the expense of that you're putting into that? Or are you gonna want to have cash available for traveling and going out to eat and things like that?
Yep. Yeah. Um, let's see. How much of percentage of our income after tax should be going into our rent to still live comfortably, especially in high cost of living cities like New York? Enjoy that one. That's a tough question.
That is a very tough question. I I lived in New York, not the city, for a few years. And yes, it is expensive. And I feel you. Um, I think try to keep it as low as you can. Um, please do not go higher than 50%. I think 50 is even way too high, especially with those student loans and with the student loan kind of environment being um, in a little bit of uncertainty right now. Then making sure that you leave flexibility in your budget for whatever might happen there, and keeping those housing expenses as low as you can. But I acknowledge that it's very challenging.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's important that like you'll hear those percentages like 50%, or I mean more commonly like with the ideal percentages like 33%. They're like, "Oh, if you're less than that, then you're in a good place." But like all of you who are going into training now, your your compensation is generally, I mean, it's on, for an average American, it's not a bad salary. It is a lot of work for the amount of time that you're putting into it and the expertise. And if you're in a high cost of living place, you're just dealing with a dynamic that is prohibitive. Like it's just not feasible. So if you run these numbers and you're like, "Oh, I can't stay under 33%," but it's like 40% or 45%, like don't feel bad about that. Like there's not a lot that you can do with these ratios, because that gets put out into like the general, you know, like online discussions about what's ideal, but like there's so much variability, right?
And it's temporary. It's
Right.
long and it feels like it's never going to be over, but it is temporary. Um, and so making sure that, after training, you do kind of revisit these conversations in terms of the percentages and things like that. But yes, you got to have a roof over your head.
Mhm. Yeah. We had a question about physician loans accessibility for IMGs. Can you
Mm,
speak to that?
that I'm not familiar with. I
So
apologize.
the
Oh.
the answer to that question is going to be dependent on your visa. If you're on a J1 visa versus an H1B, that will depend on the lender. I do know that there are some lenders who will work with H1B visa holders, um, but it really does depend. So, Jose, your message here, um, we it's more expansive than we have time for right now, but it's a really good question. If you could send me a message, if you go to olsonfp.com/question, ask this question so that I don't forget, and then it'll get into the queue, and then I can respond to you, and we can talk about it publicly, in the future. Let's see. We had a question that said, can we talk more about pros and cons of the physician loan? I'm not sure where to start with that.
I think the pros are that it makes home buying accessible if you don't have a down payment. Um, that's why they were created, for people, physicians who have been in training and haven't had a job, but maybe you're getting into your late 20s or your early 30s and you're feeling like you want to have a house, and your income in the future is going to be sufficient to sustain a payment. Um, and but you've been so busy studying that you haven't had a chance to save for the down payment. So they offer this special thing. So it allows you to own a home when you would otherwise not be able to without a physician loan. Generally, the lowest percentage of a down payment is 5%, and those come with additional costs called private mortgage insurance, PMI, which is generally a couple hundred extra dollars a month on top of the graph that we looked at, the table. Um, so it's very expensive. Physician loans, often you don't have to put any money down, and a lot of them will not charge you PMI. So it is a very real savings in terms of that additional expense that you're not just paying to the bank. Um, but the cons are it is much more difficult to recuperate your money and not have to bring money to the table when you're trying to sell. Those realtor fees, transfer taxes, the cost of getting the house ready to sell, landscaping work, painting, whatever that looks like. You're basically betting on the fact that the home will appreciate a certain amount of in value during the time that you own the house to compensate for those expenses that you're going to incur when you sell it. So it's a risk, and that's the con. That's the biggest con.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, I'm glad you fielded that question. That was a really great explanation. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Let's see. We do have some additional questions, but they aren't specifically related to this topic. So if you've posted a question in the Q&A, um, we will answer all of them. We've got disability insurance up next and a few other topics. But before I delve into that, Sarah, I really, really appreciate you taking some time to share your knowledge with everyone, and
Thank you
uh,
so much.
and your
Thanks, guys.
firsthand experience. So that's very helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And once again, congratulations to everybody. It's going to be a wild journey and it's going to be great.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and Sarah she's got her own financial planning firm, Live and Give Financial. So, if you're ever looking for a planner, she's definitely someone who can take good care of you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Now, up next, it's going to sound like something that you are like, well, I don't know if I need this, but you definitely, definitely, definitely need disability insurance. Now, a matter of when you need to get it, when it's appropriate, there's some variables, but what we're going to talk about is the why. And I'm really glad that I'm not the one talking about this because there's so many nuances to it. And so Larry Keller, he's going to be joining us now to discuss disability insurance, why it's so important for all physicians to get and how to go about the decision-making process. Larry, you're up.
All right. Got my video on. There we go. Start my video. Perfect. So who would think that you are finishing medical school, you're ready to start residency, and suddenly you're thinking, I can't wait to go out and get insurance. Boy, this sounds ever so exciting. But in the list of things that you might do during training, this is one of the three biggest things that you're going to do. You're typically going to come up with a student loan plan, like what do I do about my student loans? You're going to come up with some type of plan for disability insurance. Should I get it? When should I get it? A big one we're going to talk about today is what is a guaranteed standard issue plan? We love acronyms in insurance. It's not just for medicine and the military. So we just call this GSI. And literally, people are going to be coming at you from all different directions, and they want to sell you all different products and services. And like, where do you even know to go? So I will commend you just for being here. It used to be people would not even want to speak to me until they were a rising PGY2. You just never found it at all. But due to things like this, due to X, with Tyler, and he's got a massive influence. And younger physicians are not only smart, but they realize there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many patients I can see. And unfortunately, money doesn't come with a rule book. So once I start to get my financial wellness down, it really is pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull up my slides. And what you're going to see here is some pretty interesting stuff. Let's move this thing down here. And we're going to go, not new slow. We want our slideshow from the beginning. Okay. So I've cleverly entitled this Disability Insurance and Life Insurance, Physician Sense, and the Post-Match Financial Education webinar. And I would bet that even some of our highly qualified panelists are probably going to learn something because Tyler's right. This is extremely nuanced. We're going to talk about insurance. We're going to talk about financial advisors. We're going to talk about how to vet out financial advisors. And if nothing else, you certainly don't have to be an expert. But if you are a Spider-Man fan, you're going to know your spidey sense should be going off if you hear something that really deviates from what I'm going to be talking about in a big way. So the good news is this. The good news is you're graduating from medical school, right? You've matched. You're finally going to start earning an income. I'm not even going to talk about residency income or fellowship income, but I'm going to look at the 2024 Medscape salary survey, and the average income for a physician was up slightly. It was $363,000. So I just picked an age. Let's assume you start working at age 32, you get a 3% raise each year, and you work until your 65th birthday. Believe it or not, that you're going to earn almost $21 million. Now, I will submit to you that this is your largest asset. But what do people do? They go out, they start earning income, they run out, they buy cars, they buy houses, they buy jewelry, and they can't wait to insure this because they're like, oh my God, if I was lucky enough to go out and get that 911 convertible, if the thing goes down in flames, I better be able to buy this again. But I'll also submit to you that we're nothing more than really well-educated, highly motivated, money-making machines. And we love what we do, but we also love the financial reward that goes along with what we do. So Tyler and Sarah and Ronnie, we can all create wonderful financial plans. But if the money machine breaks down and the financial plan is being fueled by money, what happens? So most people make the mistake of insuring the money that comes out of the machine, their cars, their houses, their jewelry, their artwork, whatever you like, but they make the fatal mistake of not actually insuring the machine, which is just us. So you go out and immediately, if you haven't already been solicited for disability insurance, it's going to happen probably the first day of residency. You know, I meet you in the hallway. I'm like, hey, doc, congratulations. I see that you're a fresh out, newly minted PGY1. Let's talk about disability insurance. And you're probably going to say, Larry, there's only 3 things I really need to know. Where is clinic or the OR, depending upon what you've matched into? Where is the bathroom? And where is the cafeteria? Other than that, I really don't have any great interest in any of this. But let's say we go back to my first slide and you're like, I really am a highly educated money machine. I've put in a tremendous amount of money and time into my education. I'm going to be doing this for years. I'm going to be underpaid relative to what I should be paid for my education, training, and experience. Yeah, I'm going to go out and I'm going to look to get some information on disability insurance. So if you're anything like me, what do? We immediately take to the internet and you type in something like disability insurance for resident physicians, disability insurance for surgical resident. Whatever you type in, you're going to find a bunch of sponsored ads, and then you're going to find people that would like you to request quotes. So let's say you do that. You punch in your information, you know, your name, your medical specialty, where you are working as a resident, you answer some medical questions, and in comes a spreadsheet. Now, a spreadsheet, we all know, especially as financial planners, is really just a tool. And in the right hands, this tool can be magnificent. In the wrong hands, it could be downright deadly. Now, a spreadsheet is something created by an insurance agent with data that speaks to what is important to them. And what is important to them might not be important to you at all. And it's typically 2 or 3 pages. It's got the logos of the insurance companies on there. They're not approved by any of the insurance companies. This is agent made. As a general rule, if I was to look at any of them, I can immediately find flaws, missing information, wrong information, some areas never even brought up. So remember, you guys are physicians. You guys are the top of the food chain. You can have any insurance agent that you want. You can have any financial advisor that you want to work with. You should make them work for the fact that they would like to get you as a client. So you are better than a spreadsheet. Immediately, if you see a spreadsheet coming in, your spidey sense should go off, and you should think, this is probably not the person that I should be working with. Then we go to, who are you talking to? Well, information comes from all shapes and sizes, right? You can be in the on-call room, you can be, sitting in the cafeteria with a bunch of attendings, and information is being exchanged. Oh, you should do this. You should talk to this person. But who are you talking to? So what are their credentials? How long have they been doing what it is that they've been doing? How many people do they work with in the capacity that you're looking for in your medical specialty? So this is kind of a crazy statistic, and this is actually already pretty good. So let's say you were in a average medical school class size of 100. Of the 100 people that you started with, probably 95 are going to graduate. One of them is going to say, this is not for me. Like, I should have been a dentist. I don't know what I'm doing here. I got to get out now. Another one's going to say, nah, I should have gone to business school. This is my parents' dream. This is not my dream. I should have been a lawyer. I don't want to do this. And then two people are just going to be like, this is too difficult. I'm not going to make it. I might as well get out now. So know who you are talking to. If you go to a website and you cannot find any identifying information about the person, there's no name, there's no credentials, there's no bio. I don't know if they've been in the industry for 5 minutes or 25 years. This is probably by design, and it's one step away from a boiler room or a call center where you request your information, the spreadsheet goes out, they try to get you on the phone. Maybe they got 15 minutes to try to close the deal. And if they don't, they are off to the next. The big five, we'll talk about this. There's more companies than 5, but this has been called the big 5. These are companies that have own occupation or own specialty disability insurance. These are the ones that most people are going to concentrate on. But really, at the end of the day, finding the right disability insurance policy literally is as easy as 1, 2, 3. And I promise you, if you can do medicine, you can do disability insurance. But what's really crazy is if you look at the 100-person medical school class, and we said 95 are going to graduate and they're going to be doctors and they're going to go do their residency or fellowship or practice. In the financial planning profession, 85 out of 100 are not. So there's a 15% retention rate. So if you see someone running around the hospital talking about being a financial advisor, and they've been in the industry for under 4 years, I will tell you, there's an 85% chance that by the time you really need them, they are going to be long gone. So what do we look for in a disability insurance policy? Well, you want your policy to be non-cancelable and guaranteed renewable. This just means that the insurance company cannot take it away. They cannot change the premium rates. You can get rid of them. They cannot get rid of you. We're going to really talk about the own occupation definition of total disability, because if you're going to blow it, it's probably going to be right there. Then we'll talk about residual disability or partial disability. Coupled with that is a recovery benefit. We'll talk about the cost of living adjustment rider, and one of the main reasons why you look at coverage when you're young and healthy is for their future increase option, or for your right to buy more coverage in the future, regardless of your health, as your income is rising. So what is true own occupation and who are the big five? So this is what's known as the definition of total disability. This is really what is going to determine if you are disabled and you're going to receive your full benefit, or if you're not disabled according to the contract and you're not going to receive your full benefit. So here's the legalese. You're unable to perform the material and substantial duties of your occupation. These are the things that you literally do day in and day out that cannot be omitted from your job and still allow you to practice within your specialty. But it's always based on the duties that you were performing prior to your disability. So a well-known blogger comes out and he says, you have to make sure your policy is not only own occupation, it's own specialty. Own specialty does not exist. If you are an orthopedic surgeon and you are performing the duties of an orthopedic surgeon, that's going to be your occupation. So it's going to be the duties that you're performing, not your job title, not your board certification. What were you doing, and how has an accident or sickness impacted your ability to do your job? And if you can no longer practice in that occupation, full benefits are payable. And this allows you to be disabled out of your own occupation or regular occupation. And if you choose to work in another occupation, you'll get full benefits regardless of the income that you earn. So a good example here might be you finished internal medicine residency and you're not ready to practice as a PCP. No one's looking for you. So you decide that you're going to work as a hospitalist and you're doing your shift work, you're admitting patients, you're teaching residents, and something happens to you and you can no longer work as a hospitalist. If you have an own occupation policy and you're disabled as a hospitalist, you can literally work as an internal medicine physician in an outpatient office. And if you made the same income, it would not matter. Remember, it comes down to your job duties, not your job title, not your board certification. So the big five are Berkshire. You can use Berkshire and Guardian interchangeably. Berkshire, by the way, is not Berkshire Hathaway. So if you love Warren Buffett, this has nothing to do with that. The Standard Insurance Company, Mass Mutual, Principal, and Emeritus. This is what's known as your big five. You can now add to that Northwestern Mutual. And I can tell you for a very long time, they did not have an own occupation policy that worked the way I just described. That time period was September of 1997, wait for it, until December of 2022. So for 25 years, they did not have an own occupation policy. And if you chose to work and you made money doing something, medically related or not, your benefit may be reduced or even eliminated. New York Life has recently entered the marketplace. Very expensive policy. It's good. I believe that New York Life came out with it just so they can tell their agents, look, we have a policy, it's available. It is not priced well for physicians. It does not look good at all. Likely, if you're going to buy that policy or be pitched on that policy, it's probably a friend of yours that you went to high school or college with. You became a physician, they became a New York Life agent. Now, Guardian came out with something that's unique. And as a general rule, and Tyler can attest to this, Sarah and Ronnie probably the same, most of the disability insurance policies are always measured against Guardian. Guardian is kind of the gold standard. They're kind of known as having the policy that pays the most money under the most circumstances with the fewest number of restrictions. But what happens if you're very entrepreneurial? Or what happens if you're a surgeon, but you're not in the operating room 24/7, and you're really an entrepreneurial surgeon? So let's take a plastic surgeon. There's no more entrepreneurial than a plastic surgeon. And they say, Larry, look, I am a plastic surgeon. I have my private practice, but I also run a medical spa. And don't worry, I do it legitimately. I oversee the mid-levels. I am paid a salary for this. And then I also do consulting for pharmaceutical companies. And God forbid, this person is disabled. They develop an essential tremor. They can no longer perform their job duties as a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. They call me or their agent. Larry, agent, I want to file a claim. I'm disabled. I can no longer perform my job duties as a plastic surgeon. But wait, in comes the claims examiner. And they're like, doctor, tell us a little bit more about what you were doing. Well, I'm a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. You know that. But I also run a medical spa and I oversee mid-levels and I do lecturing for pharmaceutical companies. So they sit back and they're like, wow, this is kind of interesting. We see that you're getting your money from a broad array of places and you're looking to submit a claim for total disability because you can't work as a plastic surgeon. But the way we see this is you really have 3 jobs and you're telling us that you can't do one. And normally this would be a partial disability claim where you would receive benefits based upon your loss of income. Well, the problem with that is if you were doing all these jobs simultaneously and you can't do one and you could still do the others, you don't have a choice to walk away from the others. You're probably going to continue doing those and you're going to earn more income from those and less income or no income from the inability to work as a plastic surgeon. If this happens and you are called partially disabled, your loss of income from the inability to do surgery is going down. Your income from the other 2 jobs is going up. If you're deemed partially disabled and you don't have the required loss of income for partial benefits, either 15% or 20% or more of your income, guess what? The insurance company doesn't pay you anymore. They're like, congratulations, you turned lemons into lemonade. We're done here. So what Guardian introduced about 6 years ago was this enhanced medical specialty definition. And this is not the base definition of the policy. This is really a fallback definition. And what they say is before we told you that you had 3 jobs and you can't do one and you're still going to do the other 2, and we get it, the income from that's going to go up and the loss of income from the inability to do surgery is going to go down. Let's just take a step backwards. And was more than 50% of your income earned from performing surgical procedures? And if the answer is yes, you are deemed totally disabled. Full benefits are payable. Even if you still do the 2 other jobs that you were doing simultaneously when you were working as a plastic surgeon, and your income from those 2 jobs now exceeds what your income was when you had 3 jobs, it does not matter. Full benefits are payable and anything that you earn is not going to reduce or potentially eliminate your benefit. If you're not a surgeon, we have this definition built in as well. If more than 50% of your income was earned from performing hands-on patient care. So for those of you that are in psychiatry, forgive me. I spoke to a psychiatrist the other day and she said, can I interrupt you for a moment? I said, I would love it. You can go ahead and interrupt me. And she said, but Larry, I do not touch my patients. I took a breath and I said, I really hope to God that you don't, unless you're doing something like electroconvulsive therapy. When we say hands-on, it just means you are diagnosing and treating a patient. It does not necessarily mean that you are actually physically touching them. So if I was very entrepreneurial, I had a medical practice, but I also ran a financial blog. And then I also, was doing medical legal work, and more than 50% of my income was earned from performing hands-on patient care, let's say in clinic. And I can't do that anymore. I can still continue to do my 2 other jobs and full benefits are payable. So this can be very beneficial if you are entrepreneurial or if you've got a broad array of job duties. Like maybe your aspirations is to become the chairman of the Department of Surgery, and you're going to have protected research time. You're going to do surgery, you're going to teach residents, and you're going to have administrative duties. This could be the difference between getting a full benefit or a partial benefit. So what if you're not totally disabled? Something happens to you and your doctor's like, I got to tell you, like, you don't look great. You're telling me about your symptoms, but you don't look horrible. Like you could still work. But you have to really reduce what you're doing. You have to work a couple of hours less a day. You used to do A, B, C, and D. You can only do A and B. And this causes a loss of income of 15 to 20% or more. Well, remember, own occupation is kind of like being pregnant. Like you either are or you're not. And if I said to Sarah, Sarah, are you working in your occupation of a surgical resident? If you come back to me with something other than a yes or no answer, and you say, yes, but, I'm going to say, I don't want to hear it. You're either doing your job or you're not. If you're doing your job, you're not own occupation disabled. I mean, maybe under Guardian if you've got that more than 50% loss of income, but otherwise, you need an income loss component in your policy, and that's this residual or partial benefit. And if you have a loss of more than 75 or 80% in any given month, your full benefit is paid. And even after a period of disability, ideally, you should continue to receive benefits if you're rebuilding your practice, you're rebuilding your referral sources. Physically, you're back. You're probably more well rested than you've been in a decade. But financially, you're really not looking very good, especially if you're getting paid for RVUs or WRVUs or some type of incentive pay. So clearly, this will not apply to residents, but residents become practicing physicians. Fellows become practicing physicians. You have to keep your eye on what happens after I buy my policy. I want this to be able to change with me. COLA rider, or a cost of living adjustment rider. This just increases your benefit after disability has lasted for 12 months. Increases could be a fixed percentage, or it could be tied to the consumer price index, which is an inflation index. It could be simple interest or compounded. You know, inflation is compounded. So ideally, I would want my COLA rider to be compounded. But if budget's an issue and you don't think you're going to increase your coverage shortly, you might consider buying a larger monthly benefit and forgoing the COLA rider altogether. So other than price, what should you know? Number one is how are claims handled for mental or nervous substance abuse disorders? So I don't think like a physician. I actually think like an insurance guy, which is probably good. And when I talk about mental nervous claims, I'm thinking about this differently than the way you guys think about this. How are claims handled if I'm disabled and I choose to reside overseas? And I might not have a choice. Like if I'm a visa holder and I lose my sponsorship and I have to return to my country of citizenship, if I have the option of my policy paying me overseas in my country of citizenship, I would like to think that I would want that. But nowhere in any of these spreadsheets have I ever seen something that says, will this policy continue to pay benefits if I'm disabled and need to reside overseas because I lost my sponsorship? That would be the first question I'd be asking. And what type of increase option do I prefer in my policy? So when I say mental nervous, I think about anxiety, depression, stress, chemical dependency, drug addiction, burnout. As doctors, you don't think like this. You're thinking dementia as a result of a stroke, a trauma, head injury, viral infection, MS, Parkinson's. I'm a surgeon. I have a physical disability that prevents me from operating. And now I'm depressed. Well, I can tell you policies generally give you a choice of either a limitation for these types of claims, either over your lifetime or per episode of disability. Or in a lot of cases, you can opt for no limitation, where a cancer claim and a depression claim is considered exactly the same. Certain states like California, every policy has to have a limitation. Generally, the same thing is true if you're an emergency medicine physician, an anesthesiologist, and in most cases, a pain management physician. One company will allow a pain management physician unlimited coverage if they desire. So here I am, I'm a visa holder. I'm on an H-1B or a J-1 visa. If I'm in a compact state, which is generally all of them, except for California, Delaware, Florida, Montana, North Dakota, my home state, New York, South Carolina, South Dakota, or Wyoming, if I buy a policy from Berkshire, which is Guardian, they're the ones that does this, And it says, if my disability started in the United States and now I need to return to my country of citizenship because I've lost my sponsorship, you can receive benefits with no limitations. The same is true if you were overseas visiting family. You have tickets to return to the United States in 31 days or less from the time you left. We consider this incidental travel. And again, if you can't make it back, full benefits will be payable if you've lost your sponsorship. If you're a visa holder, this is of primary importance to know. Otherwise, you might be paying really good money on the hope that you don't become disabled before you become a permanent resident or a US citizen. And then there's two types of future increase options. One is called the FIO, or future increase option rider. You guys are still in med school, so if you think about this, when you have your flashcards out and you see the F in future increase option, I will tell you the F stands for flexibility. The F also stands for freedom. The negative is you're paying for this, but the positive is you don't need to do anything. Every single year, you're going to have the right to buy more. If you qualify for more and you desire to buy more, you can do it. If you don't want to buy more, you don't have to. Every year it's an option. Choose to use it or not, it's entirely up to you. If you're not good with administrative duties, this is probably the increase option for you. But Principal, just another insurance company, originally came out with this alternate increase option that they called the benefit update rider. Other companies were quick to steal it, and they called it the benefit increase rider or the benefit purchase rider. And this is a no-cost option that allows you to get up to the insurance company's maximum monthly benefit, currently $20,000 to $30,000 per month. The FIO and the BPR, or benefit update rider or maximize your benefit rider, they don't require any more medical underwriting after you answer questions initially. But because they're giving this to you at no cost, we kind of know the deal. The healthy person's not going to do anything. And the person that has a disc herniation at L5S1 and they're a surgeon and they just flash behind their eyes, my career might end. It could be tomorrow, could be 5 years, 10 years. I'm hoping it's never. They want as much as they can possibly get. So if the healthy person does nothing and the person that is experiencing symptoms that could end their career goes haywire and buys the maximum, and the insurance companies did not charge for this, they could get smoked. So what they do here is they require that every 3 years, you have to check in with the insurance company. It's a short application. It's only financial. If you do not check in after multiple attempts, they're going to take the increase option off of your policy. In some cases, you can never add it back. And the only way you can get new coverage is to buy a new policy to supplement what you have. Some people find this worse. They don't mind checking in, but if you qualify for more coverage, you must buy at least half of what they offer you. If you don't, again, your increase option is removed. So the same way we had our flashcards for future increase option, and we said that that was flexibility and freedom, anything that you see with a B in it stands for you better do something. And if your agent does not have the wherewithal or the systems in place to keep up with this for you, the odds are very good that your increase option is going to be lost. Principal actually came up with these numbers. So let's say you bought your policy as a PGY1. Your first option date would be year 3. I can tell you that 25% lost their increase option immediately. They didn't even make it out of training and they lost their increase option. But it gets worse. By year 6, 75% of people have lost their increase option. So it is no cost, but it is also no cost for a reason. The insurance companies, they make the statistics. They know what these numbers are, and the odds of you losing the increase option are pretty high. That being said, this can work extremely well, because if you don't want to pay for the cost of the increase option like you do on the FIO rider, this is a no-cost increase option. And with some companies, you can buy a benefit as low as $1,000 a month. That's not what you pay, that's what you would get paid. And your premium, what you pay, would probably be somewhere between $30 and $50 a month for a $1,000 benefit. And you'd have the ability to go up to 20 or 30,000 a month, regardless of your health, as your income rises. So I call that my lease with the option to buy plan. For those of you that are in California that are getting out of Dodge, I would tell you to wait. You're in the most expensive state. You have limited policy choices. Generally, the policy provisions are less liberal. So if you're getting out of Dodge, I would tell you to wait and buy your policy when you start residency. Conversely, if you're going to California, do whatever it can take for you to buy your policy before you get there. Policies in California are 20% more expensive. There are fewer companies that offer own occupation. In fact, Principal does not offer own occupation coverage to surgeons, anesthesiologists, anything other than their top occupational classification. So I'm going to see, Tyler, we have any questions out there? And then we're going to wrap up with what is guaranteed standard disability insurance and what do you really need to know? Because this should be the first step in your search for disability insurance.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you want to talk about that. There are some questions. Some of them I'm able to answer in the chat, but there's a couple that I wanted to get your thoughts on. First was, where did that go? Oh, yes. So for physicians that receive extra pay bonuses, such as with taking on admin roles, extra research funding, consult services provided, is there a way to cover these under disability insurance?
Yes, it really would not be so much as a resident or fellow because the insurance companies have what's known as beginning professional special limits. And this is where the insurance companies say, look, we'll let you have somewhere between $5,000 a month and $6,000 a month. We don't care about your income. We don't care about the coverage that's being provided to you by your employer. When you're a fellow, some companies will let you go all the way up to $7,500 a month, even if you're doing a 3-year fellowship and you're a first-year fellow. So we're willing to overinsure you relative to what your actual income is. And this is above and beyond your employer-provided group insurance coverage. It's really more for the attendings that are doing some significant moonlighting, or maybe they're doing some locum tenens work, and none of that's covered by their hospital plan because that's their self-employment work. Only their employed hospital position income is covered. What you'll also find is that there's going to be a cap on the benefits with your hospital coverage. So it might say something like, well, we'll give you 60% of your salary, but the maximum benefit is $10,000 a month. So we don't have to be CFPs or EAs to do the math, right? If I'm making $200,000 a year, 60% of that is going to give me $180,000 or $10,000 a month. I've capped out. If I'm earning anything over that, I have zero protection. That benefit is taxable to me. It's not going to be own occupation as I've described it in most cases. And on top of that, most of the time, the benefit's going to actually be taxable. So you've got a lot to lose solely relying on an employer provided plan.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. How do you feel about keeping the policies offered by our medical schools? I'm not sure how they compare or if you have insight.
It generally depends. I mean, from what I've seen in the medical schools, one of the biggest companies that does this is a company called Unum, UNUM. And you really have to look at the definition of total disability. So generally under own occupation, the way you would like to see it is you'll be deemed totally disabled. This should sound familiar. If you're unable to perform the material and substantial duties of your occupation, period. A lot of the plans that I see carrying over from medical school go on to say, and you are not gainfully employed, or and you are unable to do something reasonable based on your education, training, and experience level. And that's not nearly as liberal as a true own occupation policy. Now, they might be discounted, they are portable, They might have a gender neutral or a unisex rate in some cases, which could be a great deal for female physicians. But you also have to look at, do you have any medical conditions? And if it's not a great deal, uh, and you're healthy, it really doesn't matter. If you've got medical issues that are going to cause problems potentially for underwriting, where the insurance company is looking at your ability to purchase a policy either at all or the way that you wanted, that could be the only game in town for you. And at that point, no matter what it says, I'm going to tell you to jump on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Larry. Um, Someone asked, how does it work to get disability insurance if you have multiple pre-existing conditions? I'm afraid of getting denied. That kind of seems like a good segue to the GSI, don't you think?
Yeah, you would think I almost typed this in the chat and had someone throw me a softball,
Yeah, let's
right?
talk about that.
So everything I talked about thus far really means if I'm healthy, these are the things I want to look for. But you're right. Like, what if I'm not so healthy? What if I have pre-existing conditions? So this is where we look for what's called a guaranteed standard issue plan or a GSI plan. This should literally be the first step in your search for disability insurance. And any agent that you speak to, other than how long have you been in the business, how many clients do you have in my medical specialty, what company or companies do you recommend most often, I would add this one. Do you know of or do you have access to something that other people might not or are exclusive to you? Because these days, when it comes to guaranteed standard issues, there's two columns, the haves and the have-nots. And a huge conflict of interest is if you go to a have-not and you tell them that you have medical conditions, they might try to have you buy a policy that's medically underwritten anyway because they don't have access to a GSI plan. And a good rule of thumb is if you apply medically and you are declined, like, sorry, we don't want you, you're postponed, we might want you, but just not right now. We offer you a policy with a modification, like a mental, nervous, or substance abuse disorder exclusion because you're on an SSRI, you're in therapy, you were just diagnosed with sleep apnea, you have a cancer history, you're a surgeon, and you're seeing a chiropractor prophylactically. All of these could be some serious problems in terms of acquiring disability insurance. So a GSI plan, there's no medical history questions on the application. The worst case scenario is there's going to be a couple of gatekeeper questions that might knock you out, but there's no medical history questions. BMI is not taken into consideration. So if you're too high or too low, which is equally as bad for underwriting as too high, we don't ask. Hazardous activities are not taken into consideration. Who am I to judge? If you like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, if you like rock climbing and you fall off the rocks and you don't die and you are disabled, normally we're going to exclude or not pay benefits. None of this is taken into consideration with a GSI plan. Like I said, it may not be available if you were previously declined for individual coverage or you were offered a modified policy or your agent told you the Titanic is going to sink. Let's pull your application. In most cases, it's too late. Standard insurance company goes by decline only. Everybody else is withdrawing an application, getting a modified offer, or getting declined. Even if that's the company that has the GSI plan, in most cases, you're no longer eligible. Most applicants will be offered coverage even if there is adverse medical history, many of the same benefits of a standalone policy, and the policies are portable. The barrier to entry is that you're at an institution that has one. But I got news for you guys. Most of the plans are what's known as a non-endorsed GSI offer, and the GME does not even know that this plan exists. In fact, if you went to GME and you said, I have some issues, I don't really want to get into it, but I'd like to buy a GSI plan, can you tell me if there's one here? They're not going to know. So you need to ask the agent, do you know of or do you have access to something that other people do not? Again, since GSI plans are exclusive to a particular agent or group of agents, potential clients are encouraged by non-endorsed agents to apply for coverage on a medically underwritten basis. And then, because of adverse action, they find themselves ineligible for GSI programs. And Tyler and I go back on this all the time. I mean, we can give you names of well-known physician websites that never bring up a GSI, even though they know full well that it's there. They might also tell you that the cost of a GSI plan is more expensive than a fully underwritten plan. Hence, you should avoid that. That's not true. They're either the same or less expensive if they're structured the same way. And you guys love to do studies in medicine. We're not so bad in the insurance world. So there's a company called Milliman, and they did their 2021 annual survey of the US individual disability insurance market. And 50% or half of the individual disability insurance policies are either modified, like an exclusion rider, 34%, or decline, 16%. So I always tell people, like, if your neighbor is next to you on the right and on the left, look down at yourself and just pick the right or the left. Either you or the person to your right or you or the person to your left are not going to get disability insurance at all, or they're not going to get it the way that they would like to have purchased it. The GSI plan is literally your brass ring at the carnival. Here's some more common reasons for getting a modification or a decline. Oh my God, self-prescribing or peer prescribing? Oh, but my spouse is a physician too. They wrote me a script. Where are the medical records that go along with this? We don't know what we're getting. Other than a Z-Pack or something really benign, that's going to cause an instant decline. If you're currently pregnant or you have a history of pregnancy complications or infertility, that will get you an exclusion rider for pregnancy complications, infertility. I don't know any residents or fellows or med students that have stress, anxiety, or depression that are taking ADD, ADHD medications or SSRIs. Diabetes or pre-diabetes, a recent needle stick, but you did not get a negative HIV, Hep B, or Hep C test 6 months post-exposure. Well, I couldn't. It just happened a month ago. Then you're going to get an exclusion rider for that, not on a GSI plan. If you've had surgery where hardware was placed and it's still there, you're going to get an exclusion rider for that part of the body. I talked about the chiropractor. This is now a very big one, diagnosed with psoriasis, or worse yet, psoriatic arthritis. That's going to get you an exclusion rider. If you have the arthritic component, not benefits to your 65th birthday, it's going to be a 5-year payout, a 50% extra premium charge, and no increase options. GSI, we close our eyes to this. Recent diagnosis of sleep apnea or some other sleep disorder, or you were diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, or something along those lines. So that's my disability insurance part. I have all of one slide on life insurance. Do I charge a flat fee or an hourly rate? So I limit my practice to disability insurance and life insurance. I talk to people all day long about financial planning strategies, but I leave the planning to the people that want to do the planning. Tyler and Sarah and Ronnie. I'm a big believer that you get your financial products from a product person like me, and you get your financial plan from a planner. If you mix the two, bad things tend to happen. It's very conflicted. It's kind of like the Stark law. We got that about the pre-existing. We got that. Yeah, I generally do not do comprehensive financial planning. In fact, people say to me all the time, Larry, will you be my financial planner? My answer is no. I will be your insurance guy. I will answer financial planning strategy questions, and then I will refer you to someone that actually does want to be your financial planner. It could be a one-time plan. It could be an ongoing engagement. It really just depends upon what you are looking for. So term life insurance. There's a reason I say term life insurance. There's no other slides on insurance. This should tell you that this is the type that you should buy if you're going to buy anything. It's death benefit only. It's the largest death benefit for the lowest cost. If you're married and you love your spouse, probably not a bad idea if they rely on your income. If you're married and you hate your spouse, but you have kids and you love them, probably a pretty good idea. Generally, you want to buy a policy with a fixed premium. you can consider laddering your coverage. And this just means you're going to buy different level premium rates for different durations of time. Because if you're doing your financial planning right, over time, your need for life insurance will actually go down. And premiums for this are based on your height and weight, your personal history, your family history of cardiac disorders or cancer. And typically, residents and fellows purchase this type of life insurance. If I see residents and fellows purchasing another type of insurance, or they're even discussing another type of insurance, my spidey sense starts to go off. And I say, whoever I'm talking to is probably not the person I should be talking to. Do I sell first to die life insurance? I really have not seen that in a long time. But first to die it was a policy that would insure two people. It could be two business owners, or it could be two spouses, and it pays at the death of the first spouse and not the second one. What's more common is survivorship life insurance, or second to die life insurance. So if you have a dual physician couple and they've been around for a long time, they might say, well, if my spouse passes away, it's going to be a tragedy, but I don't really need the money now. My kids are going to need it when I die and they get their inheritance. And if you're above a certain limit, which is substantial today, 60% is going to go to the kids and 40% is going to go to the government. So a strategy is buying the second to die policy in a life insurance trust that's irrevocable. So it's not only income tax free, but also estate tax free, but well beyond the scope, of this talk. So what are my takeaways? You worked hard. You're going to continue to work hard. You want to protect the investment you've made in your career. Every individual is different. Insurance is not one size fits all. And nothing is more true than this, but not everything in life is in our control, right? Be prepared. You'd never go to a surgery without a surgical plan. Don't leave it to luck. I can tell you, people do not plan to fail. They do fail to plan. And we see this all the time, regardless of medical specialty, regardless of occupation. So if you have questions, if you have a policy, if you're being pitched a policy, do you continue what you had in medical school? Send me an email. It's right up there, lkeller@physicianfinancialservices.com. You can certainly call. What'll take you a good amount of research to disseminate will probably take me all about 5 minutes to look at. Use me as a resource. There's a reason, that I'm here. Use all of us as resources. We're here to teach. We're here to give information. I honestly believe that the doctor that is financially literate is going to have more career longevity. They're going to provide better care to their patients. They're going to have a better home life. And as a whole, they're just going to be a lot happier as a person. I don't want to find you holding up a sign after you've retired that says, "Welcome to Walmart," because you have to, not because you want to. Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, Larry. That was really helpful. I think we might have a couple more questions if you're game.
I am always game.
All right. So someone asked, what is the advantage of getting GSI disability at the beginning of residency versus waiting until after finishing, like during that 6-month grace period?
Yeah, so you would think, GSI stands for guaranteed, and that's true if it's available. But a GSI plan is predicated on a certain percentage of the assumed number of graduating residents that are buying from that specific insurance company. And if those numbers are not being met, the insurance company says, well, we're not going to hang around here. It's the law of large numbers. Like, we know the first few people in are probably not going to be great. They might have MS, they might be depressed, they have seizure disorders, they have HIV, any of that stuff. We're assuming those are going to be the first ones in. In order for us to take them, especially if there's no pre-existing condition limitation, like I buy a policy, I file a claim 3 months later, the insurance company is on the hook for that. Now, certain companies do have a pre-existing condition limitation where it's a 3-month look back from the time that you bought your policy. And if you file a claim within 12 months for something that you saw a physician for, you took a prescription medication, you had a diagnostic test, you were experiencing symptoms that a reasonably prudent person would have seen a physician for, and it's within the first 12 months that you file this claim, that they're not going to pay. So the long end and the short end is, just because the guaranteed standard issue plan is guaranteed if you meet the criteria, it is by no means guaranteed that it's going to continue to remain available at your hospital if the numbers are not met. So I would say, if you know you need disability insurance and it makes sense to you, the sooner you can buy it, the less expensive it is. If you took the cost of, let's say, a 26-year-old PGY1 or a 36-year-old PGY10, and they both kept their policies until the age of 65, believe it or not, the person that bought it at 36 is going to pay more money into the system in a shorter period of time, and they were not insured for that 10 years that they were training. So there's no time like the present, and there's no guarantee that a GSI plan will remain just because there is one there now.
Thanks, Larry. How do you find agents who will offer the GSI plans? Do you just have to ask them?
Pretty much. I mean, like, I happen to have a list and I know where they all are and I know who the endorsed agents are and I know the ones that share and allow co-brokering. By the same token, some companies like Emeritus currently don't even allow agents to share unless they are the endorsed agent for that institution. But, if you go online and you just Google disability insurance for physicians and you look for people that have written blogs or they're in podcasts, that number is going to diminish pretty quickly. Those are the people that are generally going to know where they are.
Larry, this might, I don't know if this would flood your inbox or not, but you mentioned your email. Do you mind if I put it in the chat?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. So, like, if they want to ask you, like, hey, like, does my program have a GSI? Could they message you?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So there's Larry's email address. So if you're wondering if your specific program has a GSI, Larry can, in all likelihood, know the answer to that question pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's an L Keller on the front. It's not an I, just so you know.
Oh yeah, L.
Yeah, it's an L Keller. Some people don't know and they put an I and it bounces.
Right, right. Yeah, it does look like. Yeah, Larry.
Yeah.
L is in Larry. Um, okay, so let's see. We got more. Should a female physician wait a certain amount of time to get pregnant after purchasing disability insurance?
No, but I would say, once you're pregnant, short of a GSI plan that does not have a pre-existing condition, you're going to get a pregnancy and complications of pregnancy exclusion rider. So I would lock that in before I ever try to become pregnant, whether it's fully underwritten. If I'm already pregnant, I know I'm looking for GSI. In the best case scenario, there's no pre-ex. If I'm looking at standard insurance company or emeritus, and that's what is at my hospital, that's going to have the pre-existing condition limitation. So if you're pregnant and you file a claim in the first 12 months, that's not going to be paid. The Guardian GSI plan currently does not have a pre-existing condition limitation, and that is the one that over the last 2 years has really popped up all over the medical marketplace.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And let's see.
Yeah, hypertension and hyperlipidemia.
Oh
No,
yeah.
that would be considered a pre-existing condition on a GSI, but that's not even going to impact fully underwritten policies. Like, as long as it's well controlled and you're on medication, or it's well controlled by diet without medication, not an issue at all.
Were you saying that if you currently live in California and are moving to another state for residency, we should wait until we're in our new state? That's what you were saying, right?
I would. I mean, figure it's April 1st. You're probably going to be moving in June or July. The GSI plans are going to be available at your residency program. To qualify, you actually have to be there to get them. The residency discounts are going to be available to you now because you're within a couple of months of starting. But yeah, I probably wouldn't be excited to go buy a policy in California if I know I'm getting out. I can get a better policy, I can have more options, and it's going to be less expensive. And if I want, depending upon my specialty, I can even opt for unlimited mental nervous coverage as opposed to a limitation.
Hmm. Someone just asked, should we have any expectation of how much to pay for a policy?
They do vary. If you look at someone like Guardian or Mass Mutual, they have what's called a graded premium where it's lower in the beginning. Each year it gets a little bit more expensive. They give you the ability to convert or switch to a level premium rate. The downside is that the level premium rate is based on your age at the time that you switch, but there's no medical underwriting. I would say for like a young male physician, the graded versus level, it's probably about 13 years on a year-to-year basis before the graded premium crosses over the level. On a cumulative basis, it's probably about 20 years. But if you look at it, if you're in training and you're like, my income is low, I have a lot of stuff I got to do, I got a budget, I got to do my Roth IRA, maybe I want to put money into my, 403B, especially if there's a match. It's the same insurance, you're just paying less money up front, and a dollar in your pocket today is a lot less than a dollar 30 3 years from now, or a dollar 40 4 years from now. And I would ask for both a graded and a level premium comparison so you could see where the crossovers actually are, and then make your own decision based on your individual needs and goals and philosophy. But I would probably say cost is maybe $100 a month on a graded premium for a male, maybe 125 on a graded premium for a female. Of course, it varies by specialty. Level premium for a male might be 175, maybe 200 or 225 for a female physician.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now they said, wait, so is it financially better to be pregnant then get a GSI, or get the GSI then plan for pregnancy?
No, if there's no pre-existing condition limitation, you actually can be pregnant by it, and that pregnancy would be covered. But if there is a pre-existing condition limitation, like on Emeritus's GSI plan or Standard's GSI plan, or I'm not going to buy GSI and I'm going to go fully underwritten, where I'm answering medical questions, they're doing a prescription drug check, they're reviewing my medical records, then you want to buy that before you are ever pregnant, or I would say even contemplating becoming pregnant. Same thing for term life insurance. You can easily go from the best class, lowest underwriting class, to the third category or the fourth category if you're diagnosed with gestational diabetes as a result of your pregnancy. So I would lay the foundation before you start building the house. Get it before you start thinking about becoming pregnant.
Okay. Thank you. What are the downsides of a GSI plan compared to a traditional plan?
Yeah, there's really two potential downsides. So one of them is the maximum monthly benefit typically is $15,000. That'll protect an income with no other insurance of about $350,000 annually. So depending upon your specialty, you might say that's not a problem at all. I'm not even going to earn 350,000 in my specialty. Like, I'm great. But if you're an orthopedic surgeon or a plastic surgeon or a neurosurgeon, then the GSI plan in and of itself might be inadequate to protect your income. Now, believe it or not, you might be in a situation where you did a residency in a hospital that had GSI plan A with company A. Then you go do a fellowship, and lo and behold, there's a GSI plan at your fellowship program with a different company, and you happen to have medical issues. You could buy two different GSI plans from two different companies and get the same total maximum that someone that's perfectly healthy. So one limitation is that the maximum monthly benefit is 15,000. The second limitation is that the GSI plans all have a 24-month limitation for psychiatric-based claims. Now, for some people, they might want unlimited. For others, if I'm on an SSRI or I have ADD, ADHD, then I'm getting 2 years, which is better than 0 years because I'd get an exclusion for that anyway, based on my history. Those are really the two downsides. It's not cost. So when people talk about the cost, that is a wives' tale to try to steer you away from going to the anointed agent that has access, because they do not.
Uh, Uh, um, someone asked, are other autoimmune illnesses like lupus treated like psoriatic arthritis?
Yeah, lupus is worse. Lupus, I believe, is an instant decline. Again, so I'd be looking for a GSI plan for that.
Okay. And then I think we got two more questions.
Sure.
Nope, three. Should
No
our
worries.
should our specific disability insurance policy change as we get more specified training, like you go into fellowship? Should they be modifying that?
You don't have to. The truth of the matter is the insurance company only wants to know 3 times. So the first one is when you're buying your initial policy, they're going to ask you, what is your occupation? Oh, I'm a diagnostic radiology resident. No problem. Second time is you're going to increase your coverage. What is your occupation? I'm a vascular and interventional radiology fellow. Last time that they want to know is when you're on claim. We got to know what your job duties were. Other than that, they don't care. I will throw something else out to you. I hadn't seen this for years, but is now resurfacing. And I will tell you, if someone tells you this, you really need to run. So I'm a transitional year resident or doing a preliminary internal medicine residency. And they tell you to put on your application that you are an internal medicine resident. But wait, you've already matched into dermatology or into PM&R. That's not true. All I have to do is go on your Facebook and find you holding up the sign, I've matched into dermatology, and you're telling them you're an internal medicine resident. You are committing fraud on your application. And God forbid you're disabled, they can either rescind your policy, like, hey, you lied to us, here's your money back from day one plus interest, or they're going to pay you less based on what your premium would have bought had you told them the truth. So if you've matched into something, even though you might be doing a preliminary year or a transitional year, you want to tell them the truth. I am an anesthesiology resident. I'm doing a preliminary year in this institution. I'm going to be going to this institution if I'm changing. But otherwise, the insurance companies, the phone would be ringing all day long. By the way, I'm moving from general surgery to plastic surgery. I'm doing a bariatric fellowship. Like they'd never get any work done. So you don't have to tell them.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for that explanation. Someone said, so for individuals going into orthopedic surgery, what would be your recommendation or approach to get adequate coverage for someone who is at an institution who offers GSI?
Yeah, so you basically look at it. So Guardian is a good example. If you happen to be at an institution where there's a Guardian GSI, they're unique. Guardian says if you come to us and you don't go anywhere else, even if we decline your fully underwritten application, you can fall back to the GSI. It's still an option. So I would look at 3 policies. I would look at the policy from Guardian with an FIO rider. I would look at the policy from Guardian with the benefit purchase rider, the no cost option, and then I would look at the GSI. And the pricing is going to be similar between the FIO policy that's fully underwritten and the GSI. And then look at the BPR. And then I would go back to which type of increase option do I like? So I can tell you some people, they love the FIO rider. Like, I'm willing to pay for my freedom. I don't want to check in. I don't want to have to buy anything. I don't want to have to think about this. Other people say, I would rather have the free option. If I'm going into orthopedics and I'm a PGY1, and let's say I do a fellowship, I might be training for 6 or 7 years. I don't want to spend $50 a month on an increase option that I can't use for 6 or 7 years. I'll go with the free increase option. I'll just make sure that I'm checking in at the appropriate period of time. And I can take the money I would have spent on the FIO rider, and if I need to increase my coverage, I can use it towards buying more. So no right answer, no wrong answer. Orthopedics, any of the big 5, you could throw Northwestern Mutual, into that, New York Life into that. One caveat with Northwestern Mutual is their recovery benefit. So if you're getting paid based on productivity and you go back to work full time and you could do everything that you used to do for the same number of hours or more, but you're rebuilding your practice, Northwestern Mutual's recovery benefit ends after 12 months. So if 12 months come and go and your income is still way down, but you're there full time, able to do everything you used to do for the same number of hours or more, their policy stops paying. So just beware of that.
Okay, thank you. Um, Someone asked, should our, oh wait, you already answered that one.
Nice.
What if I develop a chronic illness while having a policy? Should I consider switching to a GSI plan?
No, once you've been approved medically, you would keep what you had as long as there was not an exclusion rider for a condition that you previously had. And if there's a GSI available to you and the policy that you bought was not modified, you could potentially layer the GSI plan on top of the policy you already have, if not right away, maybe when you're finishing your training or you're finishing, residency, even if you plan on doing a fellowship. So you could certainly stack more than one policy on top of each other, whether they're both fully underwritten or both GSIs or one fully underwritten and one GSI. You can mix and match.
Okay. All right, thank you. I think that actually got, oh, another one. If you are in the Army, would you recommend the GSI versus the underwritten policy?
No, so if you are in the Army, there is no GSI that exists. At that point, you want to go to Mass Mutual. Depending upon your state, there's going to be a discount. All states except for New York have a 25% discount that's permanent. Uh, we will look at your base pay. We will discount that because there's military disability benefits associated with your base pay. We'll look at your save pay. If you're getting a COLA, we'll add that in. So that's our military offset. And at the very least, you'll be eligible for about $2,000 a month, but I've seen it higher. I've seen lately 2,400, 2,600, and Mass Mutual will actually pay you if you are hurt while you're active duty. A lot of policies, there is a mandatory suspension that if you are on active duty for more than a specified period of time, you have to put your policy on freeze. You don't pay your premiums anymore. And then when you come out, you can reinstate that policy, but you're also not covered. So Mass Mutual is great for active duty military. There's no military freeze that's mandatory. The only thing that they will say is if you are disabled as a result of an active war, whether it's declared or undeclared, that is an exclusion. But if you're out just doing a training exercise and you're running, you trip on a log, you mess up your hand and you're a surgeon, that's absolutely going to get paid.
Um, Maybe this is a silly question, but if our salary as a resident is significantly less than 15,000 a month, what is the benefit of getting the GSI now besides having a lower monthly fee once we are done with training?
Yeah. So they wouldn't give you 15,000 a month at this point. They will allow you to buy somewhere between 5,000 a month and last year of residency or fellowship 7,500 a month. So let's just say most of the companies are going to do 5,000. So you could start with 5,000 and you can have an increase option to allow you to buy another 10,000 for a cap of 15,000 on a GSI, regardless of your health. Again, GSI health doesn't really matter anyway, for when your income increases later. So you wouldn't be buying the 15,000 right out of the gate. You'd be buying a smaller benefit with the right to be able to get to that 15,000 in the future as your income rises.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, that is, we will stop there.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Larry, for hanging with us and talking for quite a while and answering everybody's questions. It's just such a nuanced decision process. So we really appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you guys. Excellent questions out there, and just keep them coming. Email me. I'm happy to look at anything you got. Use me as a resource.
All right, cool. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, we're now going to jump into, it's now time to talk about student loans. A big mammoth of a topic, and especially these days, there's a lot going on. So Steiny is going to be talking about that. So Jeff, take it away.
And Tyler, how are we doing on time? Because I know we have a couple more speakers.
Next, you got 45 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So student loans, I'm a PGY 21. I am a former program director, associate professor of anesthesiology. I retired from medicine in 23 and now do financial planning full time. So navigating student loans, there has been so much angst, I think, around student loans as a baseline, and especially with all the changes that are going through. Um, so, you guys are going to be okay. We're going to walk you through um, some strategies and tactics and knowledge so that you'll know kind of what is coming up and how to manage it. So, match is come and gone. Oh, real quick. From a professional disclosure, I'm not giving any individualized investment advice. Um, let's get to match. So match happened, right? Everyone excited. You found out where you're going. You've already figured out like apartments. Am I going to buy a house? That kind of thing. And then you start thinking about your student loans, right? Like, holy smokes, what is going on? Last time we gave a talk, I gave a talk to UT Southwestern medical students. IBR wasn't, no one could apply for any kind of income driven repayment plan. People just didn't know what was going on. And now we have a little bit more information, which is great. So, how are we going to talk about this? Let's talk a little bit. Here's the agenda, right? We're going to talk about game theory, and you'll understand when we get into it. Student loan basics, current student loan landscape, and kind of your student loan checklist. So, what are you going to do with the information that you have in hand? So, game theory. There are 7 parts to a game. There are objective, rules, knowledge, strategy, tactics, skills, and luck. So we're going to go through each one of those in relation to your student loan, so you'll be able to play this. Now, it's very stressful. It's a very stressful game. It's not necessarily a game that you knew you're signing up for, but it's a game that you're going to play, and I think that you're going to be able to play it well. So student loan basics. The objective of your student loans is to fulfill your student loan requirements. Now, you can do that 2 different ways. One, you can just pay off your student loans, pay it off in full, or you can have it discharged through forgiveness, either PSLF or an income driven repayment plan. Now, most physicians are going to opt for either paying it off in full or doing public service loan forgiveness. But just be aware that those are kind of, you meet your requirements for taking out the loans. There are a lot of fancy feelings in the media about physicians having their student loans forgiven. As a general rule, I kind of tell medical students and residents, you want to kind of treat it like Fight Club. First rule of Fight Club, don't talk about Fight Club. First rule of student loan forgiveness on social media, you may not want to like mention it. I've known some people that have lost friends over this. So just be aware that there's some pretty sensitive feelings when it comes to it. Now, there are 2 different types of student loans. One is federal loans, and those are direct, direct subsidized, direct unsubsidized, grad plus loans, and then there are private loans. Okay. Now, student loans behave much differently than most interest bearing loans in that for subsidized loans, the interest does not accrue until after you graduate. For unsubsidized loans, the interest accrues as soon as you take it out. And capitalization, I want you to remember this word. What this means is the interest is added to the principal. So the interest then compounds. For most of student loan interest and the way that you pay them, it's not compounding interest, it's in simple interest. And so you don't want to necessarily take your loans and go to any interest calculator because it's going to give you widely different numbers trying to estimate how much things are going to cost for you. So let's look at a student loan interest calculation. It's simple interest, and its interest is calculated based on a daily rate after the last interest was paid. So under the SAVE plan, no matter what you paid, the government paid the rest of the bill to pay up the interest. And then if you decided to make extra payments, you would first have to fill up the interest and then pay toward principal. But just realize it's based on a daily rate and it's simple interest. When we talk about loan consolidation, what that means is you take multiple loans, you combine them together, and what you end up with is a weighted average of interest based on how big the loan is. If you have a very large loan at 8% and you make it with a very small loan at like 2%, then that 2% loan, when you combine those, you're going to have a much higher amount of interest that you'll be paying on a potentially lower amount that you could have paid. And there is a reason why we, as a general rule, we recommend doing loan consolidation, and we'll get into that. So just kind of tuck that in the back of your mind. So it takes all the loans, consolidates them. Now, the key is the interest rate is average. It's rounded up by 0.125%. And then when you consolidate a loan, it does two things. And this is what I want you to remember. Before you consolidate, I want you to just like pump the brakes and remember, one, it ends the grace period. And two, it may restart the clock on your payments. So let's say that you decide not to consolidate right now. Under the old rules, if you waited till you were 6 years into paying on your loans and you consolidated your loans, it would restart the clock on the number of payments that you paid if you were going for like public service loan forgiveness. So just be aware of those two things. One, it may restart the clock, and two, it ends the grace period. So repayment plans, there are kind of two categories of repayment plans. One is a fixed repayment plan, and one is an income-driven repayment plan. The fixed is like the standard, 10 years in length. Fixed payments, you pay it off over 10 years. There's a graduated that is also paid off over 10 years. You have smaller payments in the beginning. You have much larger payments toward the end. And the last one is an extended plan, and this is up to 25 years. It's either fixed or graduated payments. By the end of those 25 years, the entire loan will be repaid. Now, on the other side, what you've probably heard more about is the income-driven repayment plans. And there are multiple. There was the old IBR, the new IBR, the pay-as-you-earn, the repay, which then was canceled, turned into save, which is now on hold, and then the income contingent repayment plan. So when we're talking about repayment plans, just keep that in mind. The default is always going to be the standard 10-year repayment, and I want you to keep that in mind. So what about the differences between the income-driven repayment plans? The differences are how the plans were brought into the system, how the payments calculated, the availability based on your loans, the payment cap, and what happens if you don't recertify your income. Now, this is the part that makes income-driven repayment plans a little tricky, in that you have all these different plans. How do I choose the right one? Well, right now, the save is off the table. I'm going to explain like how I'd walk through an income-based repayment plan off of this. So the income-based repayment plan is potentially, as of April 1st, 2025, potentially the most stable income-driven repayment plan because it was brought into existence by literally an act of Congress. So a little bit harder for that plan to go away. The new income-based repayment calculation is as such. You take the income minus 150% of the poverty level. That determines your discretionary income. You take the discretionary income, multiply it by 10%, is your annual payment, divided by 12, and that's a monthly income. Now, this was one of the questions we had earlier, like, what if I buy a house? What if my assets go up? What if they go down? If you notice, the only things that they're really looking at in this are your income and your family size. Now, family size, like the poverty level, that is based on your family. So if you have a significant other, your family size is 2. If you have a significant other and you have 2 kids, now your family size is 4. So it takes that into consideration when it tries to figure out your discretionary income. So let's take a resident income. I tried to make these numbers like round so it'd be easy to do. But let's say you're earning 65,000, and let's say that you are multiple years into your residency, so your actual income that you have is 65,000 that year. Your discretionary income, as it boils all down, now your payment per month on 65,000 is going to be $346 a month. Now that's on an income driven. Now, this number seems really high to a lot of people because many people were on the SAVE program. Many people were on the SAVE program during COVID, which means they were making $0 payments. Everything was put on hold. So you all are in a new generation of physicians that are coming out that are seeing some payments on your student loans that other groups just didn't have before in the past. So for the income-based repayment, that is how the payment's calculated. And then it's available to new borrowers as of July 1st of 2014. Payments cannot exceed the 10-year repayment, so it has a cap. So even if you go into the income-based repayment, you get out, you start practicing as a physician, your payments will not go over the 10-year repayment plan. And if you fail to recertify your income, then the interest capitalizes and you get switched to a 10-year repayment plan. So you might have seen some things in the news where someone said, hey, my payments were like $18 a month and now they're thousands of dollars. What happened was people missed their income certification date. The system then kicked them to the 10-year repayment plan and capitalized all the interest that had been accruing. So just be aware of that. You have to certify your income every year or when they tell you that you need to certify it. So the types of loan forgiveness, you have PSLF, and to qualify, you need to be in an income-driven repayment plan, work for a qualifying employer, make 120 qualifying payments, file the employment certification form every year, and apply for PSLF. This event is tax-free. If you have $100,000 forgiven by PSLF, you owe no taxes on it, okay? The other way is an income-driven repayment forgiveness. Being an income-driven repayment plan, you pay on the loans for 20, 25 years, you apply for forgiveness, and the forgiveness event is taxable. Now, in the news, what you're hearing a lot of is, oh, the income-driven repayment forgiveness is going away. A lot of rumblings about what's going on. They're talking about the income-driven, not the PSLF. So PSLF is what most physicians will be going for. So student loan complexities, this is where the skill comes in. For most people, if you're single and you have student loans, chances are you'll be able to figure out how to navigate the student loan system. It gets a little more complex if you have a significant other and one of you has student loans. So someone had written in the chat, hey, if I do married filing separately, what does that do to my payment? It all boils down to the the Mexican-American War in that community property states. So let's say that you are married, you file your taxes with somebody. If you do married filing separately, then the income-based repayment is based on your income only. If you are in a community property state, and we'll talk about those, you can split the income that you both have between the two of you. Now, when would that make a lot of sense? When you do married filing separately, you've got to run the numbers because there are some things that might make your taxes more expensive. And I think Tyler's going to kind of get into that. But the payment may be lower. Let's say that you are a resident earning 65 grand. You have a spouse that works part-time earning 20 grand. you're able to take that 85 grand and split it between the two of you, and therefore your payments are going to be based on half of the income. So a lot of nuance in that. It can get a little tricky. Even there, you might be able to kind of figure out the best course of action. The most complex is going to be two physician household or a household where you both have student loans. And that's where you may want to get some help in navigating, because one of you may be in one type of plan and the other one may be in a different type of income driven repayment plan. And so the community property states, Arizona, California, Idaho, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, Washington, Wisconsin, in these states, when you do married filing separately, you're able to split the income between the two spouses that are doing that. Now, there is some nuance. When you do married filing separately, when everyone hears about doing Roth IRAs, most physician households will not be able to do a Roth IRA directly if you do married filing separately. So just be aware of that. Just keep that in the back of your mind. So that is kind of some of the background. So where are we right now in the landscape, the current student loan landscape? It is changing constantly. When I first started these, when I first started these PowerPoints, they've changed multiple times based on what's going on. The income-driven repayment applications are now open, which is good. Save plan is still on hold, so the save borrowers are still technically have zero. They don't have to pay anything, but they aren't counting toward any kind of forgiveness right now. Okay. The new IBR should be available to new grads. The thing that's a little tricky is the pay plan was supposed to close down in July of 2024 to new borrowers. Like you couldn't move into the pay plan after July of 2024. We don't know. I mean, the administration is still kind of figuring out what's going on. When you've got all the student loans, it sounds like, are going to move from the Department of Education to the Small Business Administration. They're still trying to figure out what IBR stands for, right? So I don't know if the pay plan is going to be available to you or if the IBR is going to be the only one that's available. 120 qualifying payments, what does that mean? It means that you make a payment that's a qualifying payment or equivalent, like if it's on some kind of deferment, and then you have a full-time qualifying employer, like the people who were in COVID, those counted as a payment of the 120 payments toward PSLF. The current forbearance that's going on right now with SAVE is not eligible payment. So I think on Twitter, there's a question I saw, like someone said, oh, should I apply for a SAVE plan? They will not let you go to the SAVE plan. It is locked down. You can't like kind of backdoor that one and get in on $0 payments. For loan forgiveness, right now it sounds like the income driven loan forgiveness is at risk. Remember, that's you pay on it for 20 or 25 years. It sounds like PSLF is still available for now. It was in your promissory note. It was actually put through by literally a act of Congress. So it is safer, it feels like, than the income driven repayment plan. You've heard about buying back. You might have heard about the payment buybacks. What is that? That's for current people who are paying on their loans, who are like in the SAVE plan. They can't make any payments. What they can do is when they hit 120 payments or 120 months of full-time employment, they can calculate how much they would have been paying had they been able to be in a different plan. Because right now, people can't even move out of SAVE. I mean, it's just all locked down. And then you would pay that amount to a loan servicer. With the payment buybacks, that's something that you think about like when you're really close to having your loans forgiven. So what about a checklist? Let's talk about strategies, tactics, and skills that you need to manage this thing as we go through. Your goal as a resident is to keep your loan payments manageable, right? A lot of times we see in social media this FOMO of like trying to do it all and investing and oh, I'm going to do real estate, I'm going to do this and that. I want to remind you that you just need to tread water. That's all you got to do. If your payments for some reason go way over what you can afford, there are going to be options. The thing is, you've got to protect your mental health. You've got to keep food on the table and get your rent paid. The loans, there'll be ways to take care of them. Okay. So here are the tactics. That was a strategy. Just keep it manageable. The tactics are this: things to do today, things you're going to do soon, and things to do in the future. So today, I want you to file your 2024 taxes. And you could say, well, but I didn't really earn an income. I didn't have a lot of money. I'm not required to. That's fine. If you file your taxes, then that will help you with the income driven repayment plan. I want you to take a moment, download your student loan file, go to studentaid.gov, go to My Aid, download My Aid data. It is going to be this crazy text file that will make no sense. Hold on to that. That has a record of all your loans and what's been paid so far, when they were taken out, the original loan, the interest rate, everything. You want to document all that in case something crazy happens and that file, like that system, goes down. And the other thing is, change your email address at studentaid.gov and your loan servicer. Like, you may have it going to your student email, and you definitely want to make sure that you have an email that you can have access to so you can get information from them. Some medical schools, you lose your student email when you graduate, so you want to make sure you have a good email address. So we talked a little bit about like filing your taxes and $0 payments and how does that work. Now, if you remember the income-based repayment example, let's switch out these numbers to $0. So that's where you get the $0 payments. If you file your 2024 income tax return, you can show an adjusted gross income of $0. There are two ways to certify your income. It's through your taxes or through a pay stub. If you do a pay stub, you're going to be paying more than $0 payment. So you want to get your taxes filed. So those are the things you need to do right now. File your taxes, download your student aid data, and make sure your email is up to date. So the things to do soon. You'll be going through a student loan exiting counseling session with your school. You have to make sure you go to this. This is one of the requirements of being a student loan borrower. You don't want to miss any steps in this process. Second one, when you graduate, you may consider consolidating your student loans. Remember when we said that consolidation ends a grace period? The nice thing is, if you have $0 payments and you consolidate your loans, then instead of the $0 payments starting like in October, hopefully you can get them started like in August, September. So that's why the recommendation is to consolidate loans. And it wasn't until very recently that this latest generation was able to consolidate the loans. So they just opened that up. Choose an income-driven repayment plan, either IBR or pay, and then apply for PSLF. Now, this recommendation is a little bit different than what was done in the past. You'll want to do all this through the website. You want to build a audit trail. So go ahead and start the paperwork for PSLF. Even if you have no intention of doing PSLF, if you're like, well, I'll pay it off early, whatever, go ahead and start the process, because if you can show, if for some reason they say, you know what, we're going to shut down PSLF for anyone who's not in the system, if you're planning to go for PSLF or even have any inkling of going for PSLF, it's the way to go. I have met multiple residents over the years who said, I'm going to do 3 years of pediatrics and then I'm out. No, they do 3 years of pediatrics and then they do a fellowship. So now they're 6 years in. Or I'm just doing internal medicine. They end up doing cardiology and then they tack on a couple more fellowships and then they're almost there. So consider consolidating IDR, apply for PSLF, and then what to do in the future. Make sure that you track your income recertification date. Make sure you have your employment certification form turned in and download your NSLDS file at least annually and save all the documentation from the loan servicer. Here's kind of the little timeline. Now, the really scary thing is like, what happens if the student loan system fails? Every good anesthesiologist has a backup plan. So what would my backup plan be if income-driven repayment completely went away? Contact your federal elected representative. They're the ones that should be able to at least get the ball rolling to help you with this. If they switch you to a standard and they say you can't go to an income-driven repayment plan, then ask for deferment or forbearance. And then the last step would be reviewing either getting on an extended repayment plan or refinancing to private loans. I think this like little algorithm, I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to have some kind of income driven repayment plan in place. But I want you guys to sleep well at night knowing that there's something to do, that you'll be able to keep food on the table, your rent paid, and get a Starbucks here and there. So the agenda, this is what we went through. What about luck? Luck happens when preparation meets opportunity. So you have the skills, you went through medical school. It's just a lot of stuff to kind of keep in mind, but document everything like you would in medicine and keep abreast of everything going on. You guys have this. You really do. Whirlwind. Sorry, Tyler.
I always love the graphics and pictures that you use. That's like, it's always different. You got good stuff. But
Thank you.
really, really great teaching. I appreciate that. It's really difficult too. We do have some questions that have come in, and
Yeah.
thankfully Sarah is answering some of them by text. Um, Someone did ask, would the slides be available to reference later? Is there a way that we could get
Yeah,
that?
I'll do a I'll do like a could we do like a little PDF handout?
Yeah, so actually what I'll do is I'm gonna send you I'm gonna send you uh Mandy's email in the
Okay.
chat. And if you could just send it to her, then she can add it to the email that's going to go out to everybody tomorrow.
Okay, no problem.
So that's to you now. All right. So, all right, let's see. Okay. So Logan asked, can you explain a little bit more about what the IBR cap means?
Oh, yeah.
You only pay for 10 years, or what exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
You want me to field that, give your mouth a break, or you want to talk?
Either way, I'm fine.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So what the cap means is under old other plans, if your income grew so large that when you ran that little calculation, the payment could actually be more than if you had just paid on a 10-year repayment plan. Okay. So it's like a disadvantage. Like, great, now that I'm out, I'm a general surgeon earning 600,000. Now my payment is so high, I would have been better being on the standard 10-year repayment plan. By having that cap in place, it allows you to stay in an income driven repayment plan, which is one of the criteria for PSLF. And it makes sure that you don't end up like paying way more than what you should be paying. Because I've seen some of these go absolutely through the roof, and they're like, great. So my payment is like 4 or 5 thousand more than I would be paying if I were just in a 10-year plan. Did I answer that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I mean, and the cap is helpful in terms of knowing like where you would sit like after training. It also, for I mean, the intent of of this session was for graduating students, but I know a lot of times there will be some attendings in here. And so if any of you are trying to figure out if you can get on an income-driven repayment plan because you're on save and you're kind of stuck, the cap is relevant to that because if your income based on the last tax return that you filed would dictate that your income-driven repayment plan payment would be higher than what the standard 10-year repayment plan payment amount would be, then you can't get on that IDR. So that would be relevant for anyone who's got like a really high income and a relatively low balance. Like say you got $450,000 income and you got like $125,000 in student loans, you're probably not going to qualify because your standard 10-year repayment amount of 125,000 would be less than what the calculation would produce on a $450,000 salary. And so they'd say, well, you don't have a partial hardship, so you don't need to be on the IDR. And then you wouldn't be able to get PSLF because you have to be on an IDR in order to get it.
Tyler, you're so much better articulate than I am. I'm so much more articulate
Oh.
than I am.
Well, sometimes I I haven't been talking this whole time, I've been just
Well,
listening.
So we got a question about what would you recommend for an upcoming anesthesia resident? The challenge is I don't know whether you're an anesthesia resident, surgery resident, pediatric resident, any of them. I don't know exactly what income-driven repayment plans are going to be available or if there are going to be any new ones. For the income-based repayment, they're actually the old one and the new one. Under the old system, it depends, Michael, on when you took out your student loans as to what plan you're available to go into. The challenge with the pay plan, on the student aid, they said, oh yeah, you can apply for the pay. Well, pay was supposed to be shut down to anyone going into that system as of July of 2024. So I don't know what's going on there. The income-based repayment, what I would do is look at what plans are available, what percentage of the discretionary income, either 10 or 15%. And then also I'd look to see if it has a cap. And if you're going to go into a high paying specialty, it might make sense to do the cap. Now, he said, hey, one of my friends mentioned that you can't switch back from one to the other. That was actually the SAVE plan. If you were on the SAVE plan and made more than 60 payments on the SAVE plan, you couldn't go back to the IBR plan. SAVE didn't have a cap on it. So we were going to have to track like payments and make sure that we shift people out of the SAVE plan back to IBR before they went over the payment cap. But that is long gone. Just pay attention to the rules that are going to be set out to find out, like, if you go into a plan, are you stuck in that for the life of the repayment or not? Any word on Republican Congress student loan plan? I read it's possible that college cost reduction. I am delaying refinancing in hope that a match community for. So Samuel, what year are you? That's kind of the new borrower. You've been paying on your loans, like kind of what's going on. And it may be something that we might have to answer kind of offline.
Yeah, some of them that are very specific.
New borrower graduating in May. Got it. So as a general rule, it makes sense when I hear refinance, what I hear is moving out of the federal system into private loans. I feel like at least there used to be an asymmetrical risk to staying in the federal student loan system, in that federal student loans in the past had better consumer protection over it than private loans. Like when you refinance into a private loan, you refinance for either a 30-year or whatever. And I mean, that's your payment. It has nothing to do with your income. It is a standard payment. Once you pull the money out of the federal loan system, you can't put the loans back in. So let's say we go through, oh gosh, let's say that you pull it out to private loans, public service loan forgiveness sticks around, they do something, because laws change all the time. Let's say that it would have been better had you been in the federal system. You might regret switching out. As a general rule, unless your interest rate is so high and PSLF isn't an option, going to private loans for many physicians doesn't always make sense. But realize that is you burn the bridge. You don't have a way to go back in once you leave.
Yeah, it's a one-way street. I I do know I do know like Earnest is a refinance company that I know of, and they have the lowest rate that I know of. I put a link in the chat for anyone that is looking for that, but you need to be really careful because of what Jeff is talking about here. There's like it is a one-way street, and you got to make sure that if this is federal loans that you're looking to do this with, you really need to be careful that you're okay giving up PSLF and income-driven repayment plan options forever. The one thing with Earnest, though, is that they're going to be like flat terms, and so you also have to see if you can afford it. There's another one. Where is that one? Um, okay, so Laurel Road and let's see, who was that asked that? Mylan? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but I saw your question in terms of, and then Madison also your follow-up question. Laurel Road does have like a good option for for residents. You can pay $100 a month or something like that while in training for up to 7 years, and you'll refinance to, in all likelihood, a lower rate than what you're paying on the federal side. But that again is really just if you're going for um, if you're going for you're not going to go for PSLF. I would strongly look at these sort of options if you have private debt. If you have private student loans, institutional loans, I've seen a lot of those that are in the 10, 12, 14% range, and you could definitely knock that down. And while Earnest can help with getting the lowest rate that I know of, Laurel Road can help you with managing the cash flow while you're in training because you're not going to get $100 a month with Earnest. But you will with Laurel Road. The interest rate will be higher though, but perhaps not as high as the private debt that you're currently carrying. Okay. Now, there's a lot of questions here.
Let me, is there a certain dollar amount where student loans that is not low enough to not, is there a student loan amount that's so low, don't even consider PSLF? We used to use, and now that we're kind of back to the old system, we used to use a rule of thumb. And what I don't like about rule of thumbs, it's a blunt instrument. But the rule of thumb used to be if you have a debt to income ratio, so a debt of $100,000 for student loans, and your future income is like $200,000, it doesn't usually make sense to try and go for PSLF once you get out of residency. Again, your job is just to service the loan during residency. All you got to do is tread water. So, some people decide to start paying them off during residency. Either they're married, they have other, their spouse does well, those kind of things. For most people, I say you want to default to the PSLF and then have really good evidence why you shouldn't do it to then consider to get out. Because again, people are like, oh, I'm going to just pay it off. But then their plans change and then they end up doing more training or something happens, they have to postpone their training. Any number of things can happen. So staying in an income-driven repayment plan gives you a lot of options to help you so that you can pay the loans.
Something else to think about with regard to that, the dollar amount, is that there's other nuance here too, because even if it's $100,000, if you're going to be, if you're going into neurosurgery and there's a possibility that you'll specialize further, and say you did 9 years of training, even if you had like $60,000 in federal student loans, the payment amount on income-driven repayment plans is based on the previous year's tax return. So 9 years of training in this outlier of a situation, nevertheless, in year 10, even though all of a sudden you'd be making a neurosurgeon salary, your payment amount would still be based on year 9 while you were in training, and your payment amount would continue to be relatively low, probably less than $5,000 a year if we're using what we know today about the income-driven repayment plans. And so the length of training is also a factor here. So, like, the amount of debt is probably the biggest factor. Your income after training is another factor. And then the third is the length of training. So
Yeah.
we can't, it is nearly impossible to give you like a rule of thumb, be like, this is the amount of debt that if you have more than this, then you should go for PSLF, and you've got less, then it's probably not a good idea. You have to factor those in. And like the way to, like, the back of the napkin math is subtracting $25,000 from your future attending pay and multiplying that number by 10%. So say you got $325,000 in post-training income, and so you're at 300,000, you multiply that by 10%, that's 30,000. That's how much you would be paying on your loans every year after training. And then you multiply that out. So if you're an EM and you happen to work, get a job with, a nonprofit, which is also difficult for other reasons, but nevertheless, if you did and you're making that amount of money, then, and you do 3 years, a 3-year program, year 4 is still going to be based on the trainee income, because it looks back on the previous tax year. But year 5 through 10, you're going to be multiplying that 5 years times 30,000 is $150,000 that you're going to be paying toward your debt. So, and you would have been paying probably somewhere like $15,000 to $20,000, maybe not that much, maybe $15,000 during training toward your debt. So if you have less than that, and this is your scenario, then PSLF probably isn't a great idea for you. But I could only come to that conclusion because I drew those specific factors. So you've got to, unfortunately, you got to do the math based on your specific situation.
So great question about, should someone consider forbearance instead of IDR? The default, in my opinion, should be doing the income-driven repayment. And the reason why, for both income-based repayment and pay as you earn, the interest is paid by the government on the first 3 years. So the interest doesn't accumulate. Back in the day, people used to go on forbearance because they're like, I just don't want to deal with it. They did it bird box style. Just they put on the blindfold and they rode, and they're like, I'll deal with it later. And then their student loans ballooned. So if you can afford the income-driven repayment plan, that's probably the best way to go. I mean, that ought to be your algorithm, right? Income-driven repayment plan. If for some reason it's not available, start working your way down. But as a default, you should try and look at the income-driven, because it just gives you, because then you also get payments toward that 120 payments toward forgiveness. So it does a lot of good things for you. So don't just go to forbearance, because really with the IBR, they're so much better than what they used to be when a lot of people did the forbearance.
Hey, Jeff,
Yeah,
we're going to have to transition. We are going to address more of these questions, but we should get started with our next part with
perfect.
Coben.
Congratulations on the match, and thanks for coming to the webinar.
Yeah, and thanks so much, Steiny. I really appreciate your teaching. It's always enjoyable. Now, Coben, before we start,
Yeah.
I want to make sure, just because of all this student loan stuff, I want everyone
Yeah.
to know that I'm going to be hosting a supplementary webinar on this later on in
Yeah.
May, because there's just a lot of unknowns. So all of you will be, of course, welcome. There's some things that we can talk about, like your question. Someone asked about applying for PSLF before consolidation. You can't apply for consolidation until after you've graduated and your school has updated your status in the National Registry. So as far as student loans are concerned, you graduating med students can't do anything right now. So we'll answer more of these questions in the chat while Coben speaks. But I just wanted you to know that we're gonna come back to another session like this just to talk about student loans. And with that, now, Coben, how do I properly pronounce your last name? Because we've never actually spoken, we just texted for years.
Yeah. It's Solberg.
Solberg, okay. I really appreciate you coming on. Dr. Solberg, you're an anesthesiologist as well, right?
I am. Yeah. I know. It's funny because I know Steiny really well. We talk all the time.
So Coben's going to be talking about investing, some of the steps that all of you in residency can begin to take investing seriously. So I'll let you take it away, Coben. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, as Tyler mentioned, I'm Coben Solberg. I'm a practicing anesthesiologist and a financial planner. I'm out in Bend, Oregon. I actually just got out of the operating room. And I'm going to remember, like, based on what Steiny just said, I will give a very personal example of like public service loan forgiveness gone wrong on my end, and like a big mistake that I made as a resident. But I want to congratulate everyone here on matching and getting through med school. It's a huge accomplishment. It makes me think about when I matched, back in, gosh, when was it, 2008. And I really hope, more than anything, what I would tell you from years down the road, really appreciate this time. There's very few times in your life like this where you don't have a lot of responsibility for the next couple of months. You might have a few rotations to get through. And I think in medicine, we like are always looking at the next step, like getting into residency, getting a job. Take some time and really, really cherish where you are right now, because looking back, it's like such a great time in your life. So congratulations to everyone here who matched. When I work with my clients, and I only work with physicians, most of what we talk with is how to use our incomes to build a life of meaning and purpose. And it's something that I really enjoy doing. And what we'll be doing today is talking how to start investing now so that you get to make better choices later. And at the end, I'm going to share a pretty personal example that just happened to my family to show why all of this actually matters. So in order to start saving and investing as a resident, one of the most important things is to understand cash flow. And which is like a horrible, boring topic, right? Like, who wants to save and budget and do all of those sorts of things? But especially on a resident salary, it's really important to know how much money is coming in and how much money is going out. There's a lot of great software out there you can use, whether it's You Need a Budget or Monarch Money or even just an Excel spreadsheet. But with the physicians that I work with who are most financially successful, even if they're 20 years out of residency, all of them understand their cash flow. They have a very tight understanding of how much they're earning, whether that's from real estate, medicine, whatever, and how much they spend and how much they save. And part of the reason this is so important to all of you as you take this next step into residency is one of the habits that I really encourage you to build is paying yourself first. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you did what I did during residency, I waited till the end of the month and see if I had anything left over to save or invest, which was never the case. And even if you just start small, somewhere like $100 a month, it's going to build the habit of paying yourself first. And that's actually the muscle that I want you to build. In my prior job, I was in academics and I worked with residents all the time. And I was always shocked by how many of them were maxing out their Roth IRA, or even putting money in a 403 at their institution as well. And so like these people were saving somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a year on resident salary. So it is possible, but it was only possible because these residents understood their cash flow. So those things are super, super important. Now, I know just a minute ago I said I really want you guys to enjoy the next couple of months of freedom before you start residency, and that's true. But I am going to give you a couple pieces of homework. One I know that Steiny just talked about is this is a great chance for you to understand your student loans and make a plan for them. Once you start residency, you are so exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and physically, that you just won't have time to deal with them. So the next couple of months is a good chance to understand these different income-based repayment plans and figure out what's going to work for you. So I encourage all of you to attend that next session with Tyler and start that process. The other piece, which relates to what I'll be discussing today, is understanding your benefits as a resident. And you guys are all going to have medical and dental insurance. Many of you will have access to life and disability insurance, which is super important. And almost all of you will have access to retirement accounts. And some of you, for the first time in your life, you'll have workplace retirement accounts. So spending the next couple months getting that information from your program and understanding what's on offer now while you have some space to deal with it's a nice way to do it rather than wait till you start residency. So with that, how can you start saving and investing as a resident? There's two primary ways that will work best for you. One is just an individual retirement account, whether a traditional or a Roth account. And that's kind of exactly what it sounds like, which is an account that you individually own and contribute money from your checking or savings account. The other one that may be new for a lot of you is a workplace account, which would be like a 403B or 401 or anything like that. That the way that money gets in there is coming out of your paycheck, right? So you can't literally like write a check and put it into your workplace savings account. It has to come out of your earnings. And for many of you, that'll be the first time. And so understanding if you have access to that, and if your employer, your residency, is contributing any money is really, really important. When I talk with med students or residents, I always like to start on the IRA part of things, and particularly the Roth side of things, because I think for residents, it makes a ton of sense. So this is where we back up and talk about taxes a little bit. And I took a break during med school and went to law school. And one of my favorite classes, surprising even to me, was federal income tax. Reading the tax code sort of made sense about why things are the way they are. There's different incentives. And one of the big incentives that the federal government does is they want all of us to save for retirement. And so some of the ways that the government incentivizes that is they give us a tax break. So money can go into these accounts pre-tax, meaning let's say that you earned $50,000 this year and you saved $5,000 into a retirement account. With a pre-tax account, that reduces your income by that $5,000. So now you're only paying taxes on that 45 grand. And you can save in these accounts all the way up, while you're working. But of course, there's trade-offs in terms of how you can access that money and when you end up paying taxes on it. So some of the important things to know is with many of these retirement accounts, while there are exceptions, the main thing you want to think about is most of this money isn't accessible until you hit about 59 and a half. There's tons of other ways to get to it, but it's a good starting point to think about. And then the other really important point to think about is when are you paying taxes? So I'll be the first one to tell you, you're always going to pay taxes on this money. But what we're trying to do is pay the least amount over the course of your life. So sometimes it makes sense to pay the taxes now, and during your residency is definitely one of those times, even though it may not feel like it. And sometimes it makes sense to defer when you pay those taxes. And when you're earning attending salary, is definitely one of those times when you want that tax break and want to defer those taxes. And then there's, as you've seen with the discussion on student loans and just about any other financial topic, it's never black or white. And as Tyler said, the specifics matter a ton when you're coming up with, with a plan of what makes the most sense for your situation. Like the facts on the ground matter a lot. So for residents, it's easy for me to recommend something like saving and investing money in a Roth IRA. So you can open an account on your own as a resident. It could be at Vanguard or Fidelity or a million, Charles Schwab. It could be a million different places. And then you can choose to have automatic investments every single month. And, as a resident, make your financial life easy so you don't have to think about it. You can focus on important things like sleep, eat, getting outside and going on a walk and taking care of your patients. Part of why I think a Roth is so great for residents is your income taxes as a resident are much lower than they will ever be as an attending, almost no matter what specialty you choose. So paying the taxes now makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that's great with a Roth is as that account grows, all of that growth is also income tax free. So that's a really, 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 really big win. The other reason I think a Roth is really nice as a resident is, I understand for sure. I still remember those days that you don't have a ton of expendable income. There's not a lot of disposable income. And it's important as a resident to have some emergency funds available. And if you want to just do that in like a high yield savings account, that's great. But another option that I can recommend as a resident is to sort of double dip and put that money in a Roth account. So you can put it in, you can invest it. But one of the benefits of a Roth account is you can access that principal that you put in at any point without having to pay income taxes because you've already paid them. But more importantly, you can access that money without paying a penalty. So if you had an emergency and needed that cash for something, you could get to it. Now, do I recommend that piece of it? No, absolutely not. Like I would much prefer that you had, $1,000 or $2,000 just set aside for emergencies, and then you had money that you were investing. But I would much rather have you save and invest in a Roth than not save and invest in a Roth at all. And so this is, a way that I have encouraged residents to start small. Like I said, $100 or $200 a month, put it in the Roth. So that's a great way to do it. The next big piece to talk about are workplace accounts. So these are the ones that, come out of your paycheck. So, you may have access to something like a 401 or a 403 or 457. I'm sure you've seen some of these numbers. Well, what do any of those things mean? Well, they're based, I can tell you because I got to read the thing. They're based on different sections of the federal income tax code. And, basically, depending on the type of job you have, whether it's private or public, academic, state, things like that, you will have access to a different type of these accounts. They all function in reasonably similar ways. And now many employers will allow you to put money in pre-tax or post-tax to these accounts. So understanding how your program works and what you have access to is important. And like I said, now's a great time to ask for this information from your program. I bet you'll be one of the only residents who's ever asked for it. And start, just spend a little bit of time figuring out what you have. So for most residents, because they're in nonprofit hospitals or academic hospitals, what you'll have access to is a 403B. And again, you may have a pre-tax option there, or you may have an option to pay with post-tax dollars. But the big questions that you want to figure out, because it really is part of your salary, you want to find out, is my hospital or my residency program giving me any money towards my 403, my retirement account? And it's still a small number of residencies who I think are doing this, but I know that, it's not insignificant. And again, it's part of your salary. So I think it's great news that residencies are moving in that direction. But figure that out because you want to know. I think the more important question to figure out is, does it require a match? And what do I mean by that? So for a lot of workplace accounts, your job may not contribute anything unless you also contribute. And part of this, what they're trying to encourage you to do is save money. So they'll say, hey, we'll give you 3% of your salary if you put 3% in. You definitely want to find out if your program is like this, because if you don't contribute anything, your hospital is not going to be giving you any money towards retirement, and you're basically leaving that money on the table. So I would encourage you to figure out that piece first. And if you need to make a matching contribution, make a matching contribution. If not, you can think about putting most of your money towards a Roth. The final option, which, I'd say, I don't know if you have any different information, Tyler, based on the clients you work with, but I'd say still a significant number of programs offer a 403 but aren't making any contributions at all, or offering a match, right? I mean, probably half of them.
Yeah, it's uncommon. So if your program happens to have a matching contribution for residents, that's phenomenal, but it is rare.
It's rare. But yeah, you want to find this stuff out. And so, if they have a match, absolutely contribute up to that match amount. If not, really think about saving your money in a Roth IRA instead, and having it do double duty as an emergency savings fund. The final piece is, at some point you'll pick what you're investing in, and most of these programs will default you into something like a target date fund, and that's just based on your estimated retirement age. I think as a resident, that's a totally reasonable. Most of the residents I see are attendings that just graduated, are in target date funds, and we move them over and do a few different things. But as a resident, it's one of those set it and forget it things that's easy, and that's not a hard thing to dissuade people from. The last thing I wanted to say before we open it up to some questions. So, why does this matter? Well, recently my wife and I, 2 weeks ago, we were down in Panama. We got to see the canal, which was awesome. And our little guy, we have a 3-year-old at home who was having medical stuff go on. He had new onset seizures, and we had to get home quick. So we had to cancel all of our vacation stuff, which no big deal. We got him home. We got him taken care of. The neurology team took amazing care of him. We were so grateful. And for all you guys, don't be afraid to call your friends. If you ever have a medical emergency, you're going to have a great group of people that doing every medical specialty under the book. If something happens to you or your family, totally call them. It's worthwhile. But the reason that we do all of this, I wrote to Steiny earlier and said, this is why we work with clients, and this is why it matters. My wife and I will be taking time off for the next couple of months to be with our son and help him recover. And it didn't cross our mind for a second, are we going to be able to pay student loans? Are we going to be able to pay our mortgage? Are we going to be okay financially? And I am so grateful that there's none of that money stress for us right now, that we can focus on our family and taking care of each other, and most importantly, taking care of our son. And we can make that decision that's aligned with our purpose and the meaning in our life, rather than be I would love to take time off, but we can't afford it. We can't make our mortgage payment. So I know that feels a long way off, especially as med students who are just graduating and finishing up your programs. But that's why this work's important, because money's just a tool, and it really is what you do with it that helps create your life of meaning and purpose. So with that, I can open it up to some questions, and we can talk a little bit more about benefits or anything along those lines. So
Really, that was really great, Coben. Thank you. I'm gonna pan through here. And there was one thing I wanted to ask you about.
sure.
So with the Roth IRA idea, I have been a big fan of residents contributing to the Roth is a great idea because of like you mentioned, like you can get the principal if you really need it. And also they're in a low income tax bracket, so it's less expensive to do it now versus after training. Um, but I've been swayed to decide that if their program offers a 403b plan with a Roth option, that they
Yeah.
should do that instead, for two reasons. One is if they end up needing to file their taxes separately, then making direct Roth IRA contributions would not have happened, and they won't have to back out the contribution from the Roth IRA. And sometimes people don't know if
Yeah.
they're going to do that, right?
Yeah.
And then the second reason is just because it's one less account that they have to open, it just like flows through
Yeah.
payroll. But like you can't just get the principal out like you can with
Yeah.
your own personal Roth IRA. So I was wondering what you think.
Yeah. No, I do think, right, if you have that Roth option and you have an emergency fund, I think that's the easiest thing, right? Um, but if you're worried at all, I mean, the thing is, there's an easy way to get around all of that. Like you could just put $1,000 or $2,000 into a Roth IRA in any given year and kind of have that set aside as your emergency. But I do think the fact that more and more programs are offering Roth 403bs does make that a little more of a practical option. Most of that's set up for you, and you just have to pick the Roth option. So I actually think that's a great option for all of those reasons you mentioned, that you can sort of back into all of that stuff without having to do, something even as low of a hurdle as like opening your own account. So I don't think that's a bad option at all. I think it's great.
Okay. Okay, cool. Um, and then yeah, someone asked, can you speak more on contributing to the Roth 403b while married filing separately? So what I was talking about is when you file your taxes married filing separately, you cannot it well, there are some exceptions and I'll get to those, but in most cases, if you end up filing your taxes separately, you cannot contribute directly to a Roth IRA. Now, if you and your spouse live separately more than 50% of the year, then that is an exception. And you file taxes separately, you're living separately most of the year, and this might be the case for some of you who are training in different locations. Um, and so that's an exception. The other exception is if you make less than $10,000, and that will in all likelihood not apply to anyone here. So, um, in any case, what caused like, and there's actually someone that I know who he he's filing married separately unexpectedly, and he made a direct Roth IRA contribution last summer, and now he's having to do what's called recharacterization. Because according to the IRS rules, you have to back out that contribution that you made to the Roth IRA. And if you invested it like you wanted to and probably did,
Yeah.
you have to take out the growth, the profit of it as well. And like if you use Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard, they have these systems to help you calculate it. But nevertheless, it's a headache. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm kind of like especially if you're single, then direct Roth IRA, whatever, that's fine. But if you're married and there's a chance that maybe you'll file your taxes separately, I really like the Roth 403b because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think this raises a great point, Tyler, right? Is everything you do in your financial life has impacts on other things, right? Like we're talking about taxes, but we're also talking about student loans, and we're also, right, like all of these things interplay together. And it's very simply to say, oh yeah, this is like the best thing for everyone to do. But if you're filing separately because it's the right thing to do for your student loans, or you have to for, a variety of reasons, it impacts a ton of other things that you'd be totally caught unaware.
Yeah. Yep. And like I'm glad we're talking about this because so many of you, like your colleagues who are a few years ahead of you, who went down the route of making Roth IRA contributions, they felt so good about doing that. They're like, yes, I'm saving, I'm investing, I'm doing the responsible thing. And it is deflating. Like it's not the end of the world, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
mentally deflating when you're like, I
Yeah. It
did
really
this
is.
one thing. And so if you do it this way, it's simpler and you won't have to unwind it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. I mean, it's an easy recommendation for residents, I think. The whole thing is simpler, to be honest.
Mhm.
other than not being able to access those funds. But
Right.
in many ways, that's kind of what we want anyway,
Right.
right?
That is
I
the
mean, it
intent.
is.
Coben, a question for you. If you are married,
Yeah.
filing separately, you can still utilize the workplace 403b and make contributions there individually, right? We just couldn't contribute to another non-workplace Roth account. Like they're asking if they contribute to the Roth 403b, are they unable to contribute to a personal Roth?
No, you can do both. You can't do it directly, right? Are we still talking that same stem
Right,
where
filing
they're,
separately. Right. Yeah,
yeah,
you'd have to
you
use the
still can't do
backdoor
it
Roth.
directly. You'd have to do a backdoor Roth, which introduces a whole other complication. But yes, you absolutely can make Roth 403 or 457 contributions and Roth IRA contributions.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, the Roth IRA would have to be backdoor.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So, and like, even though you could do backdoor Roth contribution of $7,000 to your personal Roth and contribute to the Roth 403b while filing separately, you have to think about the fact that the maximum contribution to the Roth 403b is $23,500.
Right,
If you're hitting that and you still have
right.
more to save, then well, you need to hire Coben. That's what you got to do. Because
Yeah, if you're doing, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you're doing that as a resident, you're doing an incredible job for one, like that's not something I've seen before. I've definitely seen people save around 10 or 12,000, but that would be, an unusual circumstance.
I mean, it's sometimes the case. Like some people, they're like married to somebody in finance or tech or something, and they're
Right,
making $200,000 or something like that,
right,
and that's a very, very good but niche situation.
right.
Uh, so anyway, but otherwise, in most cases, the Roth 403b will be plenty
Plenty.
of headspace for you to be able to save and invest.
Right.
Let's see. Um, Someone asked, so when deciding what to save in, workplace account, if matched by the program, is better than the Roth IRA, then have an emergency fund in a high yield savings account?
Yeah. So if I'm understanding correct, so the point I was trying to communicate is the first thing you want to figure out is, does your program give you any money at all? So, like at OHSU, for example, where I used to work, they put, it must have been something like 1% in for residents. So that, they'd get a few $1,000s a year that just got contributed no matter what their resident did, which was awesome. That's very, very rare. In that case, you don't necessarily have to do anything, right? But the cases that are really important to understand is if your employer provides a match that requires you to make a contribution. Because in that case, if you don't make a contribution, you're just leaving that money on the table. And those are the cases that I would preferentially save in your workplace account over a Roth account in order to get that match. Um, the other important thing to consider based on what Tyler and I have been talking about, even if you're making, say, Roth 403b contributions for the money that you're putting in as a resident, the contributions that your employer puts in are almost certainly going to be pre-tax when they're making matching contributions. So that's like another wrinkle that, for many of you, you're not even going to need to worry about. But if your employer offers a match, I would absolutely put money in so that you can obtain that retirement savings as well, rather than just letting it go to waste.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. Good
But
advice.
you could still do the same thing that you just mentioned, Tyler, right? Like you could put that money in a Roth 403b and obtain that match.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the match used to kind of throw me off because I'd say, well, if they have a match, you definitely want to do it. And if they don't have a match, then do a Roth IRA. And I'm like, you know what? Forget this. If you're going to do a Roth IRA, do the
True.
403b regardless, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like that gets you everything right there. And then if you wanted to build up emergency savings, you can do that in a high yield account, which you have total access to.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So somebody posted, they're like that they have a 6% match at their program.
Yeah,
That is
that's amazing.
unbelievable.
Great.
So
That's
yeah,
super rare and that's awesome.
Yeah, good for you. That's awesome. Yeah,
Uh, Elizabeth, do you have to contribute in order to get that, or are they just making that contribution?
yeah. So that's a match. Yeah, you have to contribute.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so that like goes into the budget and cash flow. So, but it's worth it.
Totally.
Like, what is that? That'd be like a 36 or no, $1,800, or where's my brain? $3,600 like bonus in
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. That's crazy.
spending. Yeah. Yeah, we could run it. Yeah. So if you're on a $79,000 salary, um, and so what that would this is a good use case. So if you're at 79,000 and the match is 6%, that means that your employer will put $4,740 into your 403b account if you also do that. Now, if you do it on a Roth basis, there's no tax deduction. So what ends up happening is that full amount gets taken out. Like you have to pay taxes on that. So if you're like that will result in a after tax income of like 61,000, and then you have to take out that 4,700 that you're contributing, and you divide that
Right.
out, and now your income is going to be after tax around $4,700 a month. So you just have to like do that math, like, because the 6% sounds great, but it's
Yeah.
also not cheap. Like we're talking about
Yeah.
a $425 a month in
Right.
post-tax income.
And that's what, again, this is why understanding your cash flow as a resident is critical, because then like, and maybe I can't do 470 a month, but I can do 250 and absolutely do the 250, right? And so that cash flow piece, why it's not like super sexy or necessarily fun, is critically important to start building wealth. And it's a great habit to build.
Yeah. 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 Well, I'm glad y'all are answering questions. Steiny's answering this one about married filing separately. Um, Coben, thank you so much for speaking on investing and such. And you're welcome. I'd like you to stay if you're available. This next part I'm going to do is trying to bring this all together for everyone. And I'd like any of the teachers who are still here. So that would be, who's here? I got, oh yeah, Larry's here and Sarah and Steiny. Um, but I'm going to share a document, and this resource will be available to all of you in the um, in the email that comes to you tomorrow. So you'll get the PDF in addition to the other resources. Um, Before I share that, I want to thank all of you for teaching today. Sarah and Steiny and Coben and Larry and Ronnie. He's left for the day, but appreciate all of you taking some of your time to teach today, and for all of you who have come to listen. It means a lot, and it shows that you're really trying to take seriously some of these decisions early on. It's really going to pay off. Now, hang on, where did that document go? Of course, I'm like, oh, where is that? Ah, here it is. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And what do we have here? All right. There we go. Wait, where'd it go? All right. Okay, so you have all had a chance now to learn about managing cash flow now between now and when you get your paycheck in July. And then that's going to have to continue on. Now you're getting the paycheck. That's great. But now it's going to be about setting aside funds for those expenses that are going to be ongoing, trying to save some if you can, building up emergency savings. We talked about disability insurance. We talked about some things with student loans, and we will talk about more of that later on in the spring because we just don't have a full set of actionable steps. There's a lot of variables, so we will send you information about that when we have it. But all of this is like when you think about it, and the reason why financial planning is really difficult is because it's not just about knowing things. It's about being able to organize and being able to keep track of what you now know and what you yet do not know. And so that's why I regularly try to make an updated version of a resident financial plan, to just try to give you a list of things to do. If you can accomplish the things that are on this list, you're going to be really in great shape. And it's not to say that you have to complete all of this. Like that would be really difficult to do. If you do, then great. But just try to take some steps as you have the time now between now and when you have orientation. That's great. And even if you can't take action on some items, so for example, like with the student loans, you can't do anything about it right now, right? But you have a reference point here. So with student loans, the one thing you can do is electronically file your taxes. And then we talked about married filing jointly versus separately. If you're going to file your own taxes, I forgot to mention this, but Free Tax USA is a far better platform than TurboTax. So if you haven't filed your taxes yet and you're looking for a fairly simple process, even if you made no money last year, Free Tax USA is a really great option. And then come late May, early June, once you're graduated and your school's updated your status, you will be able to apply for a consolidation and get on an IDR plan. The details of that to be determined, but come back and we'll talk about that in late May. And then, as far as PSLF is concerned, once you've selected your IDR and you're on it, then it's just a matter of making the payments and certifying your employment with your nonprofit organization program employer on an annual basis. Technically, you don't even have to do it annually, but it's just good for record keeping to not let too much time go by before getting those payments actually counted. And so, and the same goes for like private loans, insurance, employer benefits, cash flow. Like if you look at all this and you're like, you got to get all this done, it definitely feels like a lot, and it is, but just take it one step at a time. And if you do and you can check that off, if you're anything like me, I love a checkbox that I get to check. I'm like, haha, like I've won. You know what I mean? Like it's like it I know it may seem simplistic, but it feels very good to accomplish things on an incremental basis, especially when the big project, like making a financial plan for yourself, is enormous, right? So break it down into smaller steps. That's why I wrote this way. And you can modify it, because everybody's circumstances are a little bit different. So this document will be available for all of you to be able to use. Um, it's a PDF, so it'll be easy to just email to you, and you can utilize it. And then Mandy also I think she put it in the chat. Um, I'm not sure if that maybe she did, I don't know, but in any case, it will be in the email tomorrow. Um, making a plan is like really really important, and trying to just do what you're capable of doing um, at any given time. And if you hit a roadblock where you're like, I just can't do this anymore, like I've hit a mental roadblock, it's okay to pause and like just don't touch it for a few days or a week or so. You do have like this time where it's not super busy, and so it's good to try to take action on some items, but like don't feel like you got to do it all in a weekend. That can actually lead to two things. It can lead to bad decisions because you're fatigued, and two, you might just start hating financial planning, which you don't want that, because there's actually a lot of good results that come from the steps and the maintenance over the years. So you want to maintain a good relationship with your own planning process. So just know yourself and know like what your limitations are, and where you have like the time and the interest, like go for it, like get as much done as you can. So that's all I wanted to share as far as this is concerned. I love talking about all this stuff, so I would nerd out and just keep talking. I'd like to take the remaining 20 minutes that we have to address any other questions that you all have.
Yeah, Tyler, there's one that went in. He said he was having errors with the e-filing system. He tried H&R Block, TurboTax. He's a U.S. citizen. So the other key thing with filing your taxes, if you're on a J1 or H1, you have to file a non-resident return, and that typically you can't do that through TurboTax or H&R Block. I've got to look up the name of the company that does that online for a minimal fee. I don't know if you know that off the top of your head, Tyler.
So you're talking about, so someone asked a question who is not a citizen?
No. So they are a citizen, but I went on a tangent because,
Okay.
went
Okay.
on a tangent.
Sure.
So they are a U.S. citizen. They tried TurboTax H&R Block. They uploaded their 1098 and it's kicking them out. I know in the past you had said you got to put in like $1 of interest in income or something to trigger it to go through. What are your thoughts? Because you can't have, it will probably kick you out if you have zero income because they're like, why are you even filing? Is that correct?
Yeah, so there these DIY tax software programs are tricky. Sometimes people go through them and they have no issue with zero income, and others say that they get prevented. And because of the way in which questions are asked, they're confusing. Like when I'm going through TurboTax with like a client, like because sometimes we do it over screen share, I have to say the question out loud multiple times to make sure that I understand what it's asking. It feels like an exam. Um, and so it's possible that just because the way the questions are answered, that it then leads to a conclusion where they're like, oh, well, you don't make any income. But the best way that I've seen to overcome this is to go in, there's a section within the income section. Normally they're going to say, "Oh, what's your W-2 income or 1099 income?" But there's another what's called like other income sources section where you can input interest income. And the challenge with that is that, again, the software is designed to expect that you're going to be uploading what's called a 1099 INT, where you got interest from a bank account that you own. And they're reporting the interest that they paid you, and you have to pay taxes on that interest income. But you're not doing that, right? Because you don't have that. Um, what you're doing is you need to you need to put in $1 of income, and if it asks for like a name, then you could put in the name of like a family member or a friend that you could have loaned $100 to, and they had to pay you 1% interest. And they paid you $1, and there's your interest income. There's nothing illegal or untoward about this whatsoever, but the inputs are challenging. Sometimes people have told me that they have to put in a tax identification number. And if that's the case, then you would have to pick somebody that you're close enough to that they would be okay giving you their social security number. But when I've actually looked myself, you can override that and not have to put in someone's tax ID number and just get through it. But I mean, there's a lot of minutia here, and I'm not trying to say that it's foolproof, but that's been the best bet that I've seen. So, yeah, if anyone has any follow-up questions on that, let me know. As far as that other website that you mentioned, Steiny, about for like IMGs who want to, but see, well, I guess this is a bit of a presumption, but most IMGs that I've met do not have very much in student debt. Um, so maybe, but I guess we're not just talking about IMGs. We're also talking about people who went to medical school here, have loans, and but they might not be a citizen. So and I mean, that's something to look up. I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember off the top of my head right now. Um, so, um, you got something? Ah, awesome.
Yeah,
So what do
if
you
only I had a slide on this, that'd be really helpful, wouldn't it?
got?
I knew I had it somewhere. But this was what I looked up before. If and they have to file a 1040 NR. And like if you have a friend of yours who is an IMG and next year during residency, they're like, oh, I got to file my taxes. Make sure that they go this way because if they go the other, if they do it if they don't file the 10 NR, then they have to do an amended return, and it's a big kind of a hot mess. So
Okay.
we're all in this together, right?
Yes. Yeah. Um, let's see. I got another question here. Um, oh, you know what? Someone had asked earlier about, um, like about working while in training. And since I have you two doctors here, what do you think about that? Like this person mentioned having like multiple kids and like trying to manage a budget, and they were talking about, should I get some side jobs? What do you think?
For the say that question again. I didn't totally catch that, Tyler.
So the person was asking about ideas about earning additional income beyond
Okay,
the
Yeah.
resident salary.
beyond a resident salary.
Yeah, not moonlighting because they won't be able to this year, obviously. Should they try to do
I
that? And if so, like what should they do?
I mean, I don't know what you think, Steiny. I did not have the space mentally, physically, or like time
Yeah.
wise. I mean, I went to a program. We were definitely sort of pushing the limit of that 80-hour work week every single week, and I was exhausted. Like I can't even imagine trying to do, any of these side hustles take time, as we all know. Like it takes a lot of time and a lot of mental energy, and I can't imagine anything is going to compensate you well enough to make that worthwhile. Considering your top priority, like you're learning how to be safe and how to be a really good doctor. That's your top priority, and if that means less income over a course of a couple of years, um, so be it. I did my anesthesia training at Penn, and one of the advantages we did have is when we worked after hours, after 5, we did get, I don't know, I think we got like $100 an hour, which was pretty awesome as a resident. So I took advantage of that, but I think that option is pretty darn rare in residency training. But yeah, I'd like to hear from you, Stein. I don't think it's worth
Yeah.
your time.
So,
I just
uh,
don't.
but some of my background, former program director, I was on quite a few boards at the GME at a large institution. We have 1,600 residents. A couple of my thoughts. Actually did have a lecture on don't let your side hustle go sideways. And one of the things that you can get into trouble with for one is moonlighting, which I know they said they're not going to moonlight, but moonlighting without permission from your department, you can be relieved of your residency. So kicked out of residency. One of the one of the biggest assets you have is your ability to practice as a physician and practice in residency. So make sure, one, there's nothing against it. ACGME guidelines, when they mention moonlighting, they specifically mention medically related. So, like if you're doing Ubering or Uber Eats or something like that, that's not actually included within the 80-hour work week. Um, the the other thing that I think about is there are some employers that you have to get permission to do any kind of outside employment outside. So let's say that you work for institution A, your employer is actually a hospital. The hospital may have a policy that states that you won't do any other work outside of that. So let's say you're like, oh, I'm just going to do Uber. They may decide because you're an employee that, oh, you owe me a piece of the money that you earned as an Uber driver, even though it had nothing to do with the hospital. So outside employment, I would really watch for, and two, the moonlighting issue. Um, I did a survey of anesthesia residents and moonlighting, oh gosh, years ago. And one of the comments that we got was, my husband and I are both residents. We have to moonlight for childcare. Done. So I can appreciate trying to live on a resident salary, trying to take care of family and your mental well-being, and just even the time. We had a resident years ago that did a lot of moonlighting. He fell asleep on the way to work and got ran over by a semi and barely survived. So you've got to take care of your family. Also, you've got to take care of yourself. And medical school was a time that, gosh, you had so much freedom in what you could do. and you may have some rotations that are like super light. But talk with some other residents and find out, because they may have like internal moonlighting gigs that go on, like holding a pager overnight or something like that, that you might be able to do that wouldn't impact you too much.
Oh, thank you guys. Appreciate that. I largely agree with you, but I feel like because you've walked in their footsteps, or they're about to walk in yours, I should say, your experience is a lot better to lean on here. Um, Somebody also asked a question about that's kind of related, I think, to this, about thoughts on house hacking. Now, when I hear that, that tells me like flipping houses. And if I'm incorrect in that assumption, um, uh, please restate your question. But to that point, if that's the case, if that's what your question is about, I find that how like home ownership, like in largely with what like Sarah, what you talked about, it's it's a values based decision as well as like numbers and seeing like if it works. But if you're looking at any sort of property or real estate in terms of investing or try to making money on it, you are starting a business. And in my opinion, this falls under the same category as what we were just talking about, in that you you have a limited amount of mental space and time to be able to take care of things that are not your job and are not your immediate needs. So, and this, like, I get this question from people related to even like buying a home to live in while in training, and then I'll just convert it into a rental afterward, even if I move away. And it's not an inherently bad idea, but you are starting a business. So as long as you have accepted that you are starting a business by getting into the landlord business and you want that, then it's fine. But you cannot go into it with the idea that this is creating passive, easy income. There will be headaches and it will take a lot of your time at times. And it's not, there's people that have said like they did it and it's like paid off because it was a condo that was right across the street from a hospital and they've got tons of renters because the next residents come in and they want to rent. That's all well and good. But when it comes to it and you are the property owner, there is undoubtedly a lot of pressure to make things work, and it's supplementary to your normal life and your work. So just make sure that you're committed to starting a business. And if you are, then by all means do it. But if you're not, then do not do that.
So
So
Tyler, the house hacking, they're talking about living in a duplex, where you buy a duplex, you live in one side, you rent out the other side. Um, and then, oh, the rent pays for both units and tax advantage. So I'd like to introduce the concept of JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. And when you're doing this duplex thing, like, I get it. I knew a resident who was ENT. She always had an anesthesia resident for a roommate, because then they could walk her dog, because she's like, you anesthesia residents have it so easy. It's kind of funny, but yeah. So part of the deal was they lived there and they had to walk the dog. But as a program director, you can only, like part of it is like, if something breaks, like, who's going to be at the duplex to wait for the people to come and repair it? I mean, that's the big thing I think of with buying a house. Who's, and if it's just you and you're renting out the other side and you're both residents, um, you know, that can be a challenge. And what if you rent it out to somebody and they're a problem tenant, right? Now you're not only living next door to them and sharing a wall with them, it might turn out great. It might turn out not so great. Um, you know, Again, tread water. You're going to be good. Financially, you guys are going to be sound. You don't have to do everything online, because I guarantee you that you'll only hear about the curated lifestyle of someone who did it and it worked out great.
I'll chime in as well. So as far as the house hacking, so I've actually been a landlord since 2013. I have a single family residence, and I had, before I got married, and had roommates that I was renting to, and they all had to sign leases. We managed it remotely when we moved out of state. And when we came back, we were house hacking and we had a duplex. It is a lot of work. Um, Tenant screening is of critical importance. I cannot stress the importance of tenant screening. Um, Credit reports and references and checking and making sure that you also have to be up to date on landlord tenant laws, which is a whole other ball game to make sure that you are doing right by your tenants and you're not exposing yourself to additional risks. So while in residency, that's something else adding to your plate. And then, like I talked about in my part, like Steiny referenced, when something happens, you don't have the luxury of saying, like, I'm fine with not addressing that now. Like, your water heater goes out. You're like, I'll shower at the hospital for the next 3 days. I don't have time to deal with it. When you're the landlord, you have to take care of it. You have a legal obligation and people are expecting that. And there's a lot of financial risk on the line in terms of, you can screen tenants all you want. But ultimately if something breaks or there's an accident or something like that, you have to pay to fix it. So you are never as careful with a house as you are with your own. And so now you are owning a house that somebody else is the renter of. And they're just not going to be as delicate with it as you are. So there's a lot of additional risk, additional liability, the insurances that go along with it. It's a lot to manage. And if it's not something that you're like excited about and ready to learn about and manage, like Tyler mentioned, it's very unlikely worth the hassle.
Sarah,
And I,
did you in your lecture did you talk about the emotional like roots that you drop when you buy a house in there?
I did. I briefly mentioned it in terms of buying furniture and decorating your house, but beyond that, didn't touch on that. But it's very real.
Yeah, what I see with trainees sometimes is they'll buy a house because that's what adults do, and then they decide that they want to do a fellowship, and then now because they own a house, now they limit the fellowship to where they're living currently, and sometimes it's not the best program for them. It may be a good program, but a better program would have been somewhere else. And so now you just introduced an emotional part to the decision making process. Or you buy the house and they're like, well, but we have to go back to so and so because that's where we own a house, even if so it does limit your degrees of freedom. Is another thing. Would you do the house hacking again if you had to do it all over, Sarah? Sounds like you had a decent experience with it.
We did. We started it pre-med school. So my husband is a career changer. So we went into it pre-med school and already had experience. I had experience with a single family residence, um, which was just a really lucky situation. It was like a new construction, so there wasn't a lot of maintenance. The other house wasn't so new. It was like 80 or 90 years old, so there's a lot more maintenance, and what led us to sell it. It was like it's too much work. Um so I mean, we were very fortunate that it worked out well for us. Would I go buy one now? No.
Yeah, it's a very different world now.
Yes.
well, and like Sarah raised a great point. And I'll tell you, like having gone to law school, like one of the blind spots for doctors, besides medical malpractice stuff, are legal issues. Like in every other part of our life, like how exposed we are to lawsuits, and putting yourself through that as a resident unnecessarily, I just think is a little bit wild without understanding exactly what you're getting into. And I mean, let's be clear, like most residents just do not have the time to really understand all of the legal obligations that they're signing themselves up for as a landlord.
Yeah. Yeah, you got enough on your plate, you all.
I don't know if it's not a time to optimize. It's a time to get through. Honestly, I mean, Steiny said it. It's a time to get through. You can look at, like prioritizing later on once you're in attending, but it's just a time to get through.
I'm gonna write that as a quote, Coben. I like that. Not the time to optimize, it's the time to get through. I like that. All right. Well, it is 7 p.m. and I said that we would end at 7 p.m. So I'm going to stick to it. Thank you all so much for coming today. Coben, Steiny, Sarah, Larry, and Ronnie, and Mandy. Thank you so much for all the background support that you provided, and all you that attended. So we'll have an email to you tomorrow with the resources that we mentioned, including a recording of this session. So thanks again for coming. And we will be having a follow-up that will be student loan focused later on in the spring. So hope you all take care. Hey, Larry, you're still here. There you are. All right. Well, have a good night, everyone. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Good night,
Congratulations.
all. Take care.
Congratulations.